More than that's too expensive.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, ma'am. I think we can get started.
Okay, we're going to start, everybody. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
We're going to get started. It's 7 o'clock.
In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Deputy Clerk Pamela Dimmick.
Can't hear the mic on here.
Why does this happen every time? Is it better?
Somebody turned them down.
Can you hear?
Great, come on, format.
Hello? Where's Matt?
Me?
Turn the volume up.
Matt will come in and turn it up, I think, when he realizes we're in a panic.
Hey, Matt, where are
Watching
you?
from the next room, he mans the cameras.
I don't know. Happened last time, too.
It is. There's some knob he turns.
There he is. Like magic. Okay.
Hello? Can we
better?
hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay,
Much
great.
better. Good.
Okay, here we go. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Deputy Clerk Pamela Dimmick announced that this is a special meeting with the meeting notice published in the Hunterdon County Democrat, issue of November 22nd, 2018. A copy of the agenda for this meeting was forwarded to the Hunterdon County Democrat, Times of Trenton, Star Ledger, Courier News, posted on the bulletin board, and filed in the clerk's office on November 23rd, 2018.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Appreciate it. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. We did expect somewhat of a crowd, but this is a good show of force. So we're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves first. We have two guests, Evan Van Gilson from Platinum Helicopters, and we have Max Jason, our Deputy Fire Chief. So we're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves. You all obviously can listen, and then we're going to open it up to the public. And when we do the open to the public, since there's so many folks here, I'd like everyone to be concise with your commentary. And if it's already been said, you can kind of say, I support that or whatever. But try, in the interest of getting through everyone's interest and wanting to talk, let's just try to be concise. But there will be Q&A, so we'll be able to have a dialogue. Okay? Great. Thank you. First, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we've asked Deputy Mayor Rick Wolf to take the lead on this to get us sort of a legal basis and grounding of fact. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick, and let you lead the discussion.
As Tim said, I'm Rick Wolf, and can you all hear me okay? Good. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm actually very pleasantly surprised by the turnout. I've received literally dozens of emails from residents about this issue, with lots of suggestions, useful suggestions, and obviously support. I only received one email in support of the helipad, so it's quite clear to me that the residents are overwhelmingly against this. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes and give you some background on what I've found to date and conversations that I've had with various people that are relevant to this matter. And I invited two people to join us this evening, Evan and Max, because I think they could give us information that would be useful in deciding how we want to go about dealing with this. They will stay during the open public session, or at least for the first part of it, so you'll have an opportunity to ask each of them questions. I'll start by discussing the Ridge's application and some of the key points. The Ridge is proposing to put in what's called a Helistop. It's not any sort of commercial airport, it's a landing pad for helicopters. It is relatively sparse. There's not going to be any hangar, any refueling, any lights for night flights. It's sort of kind of the minimum for helicopter takeoff and landings. The Ridge is proposing to operate this Helistop during the months of April through December. As I understand it, from having chatted with Evan, most of the flights will take place in the warmer weather, which makes some sense because that's when people really play golf. There may be some diehards out there playing in November and December, but people who are rich enough to afford flying back and forth by helicopter likely aren't going to be out in those months. The flights will likely take place during the week as opposed to on weekends, because again, I discussed this with Evan, and Evan will get into it in more detail when he speaks, but best we could tell, this is going to be folks flying in from New York City to play around a golf with their clients or friends and then hopping back in the helicopter and flying back. And those type of folks apparently do this during the week when the golf courses are not crowded. On the weekends, they're flying their helicopters out to the Hamptons. There are some more seats up front if anybody wants. The hours of operation are basically daylight hours, dawn to dusk. He's not setting this up for night flights, and there'd be no real reason for anybody to be flying in other than medical emergency use, flying in at night. He says in the application that there won't be more than 8 takeoff and landings per month. And he says later, no more than 48 per year. I take that, if I read it literally, to mean that what he's saying is there may be as many as 8 per month, but over the course of a season, there won't be in the aggregate more than 48. Because 8 per month times 9 months is 72. And I'd want clarification on that, but that's what the application says. In terms of how the application process works, he submitted his application to the New Jersey Department of Transportation. The rules provide that once that application is deemed complete by the NJDOT, 2 things happen. Residents have up to, well, the public actually, it doesn't necessarily have to be residents. The public has up to 30 days to comment. I was told on Tuesday by the NJDOT that that publication has occurred or will occur shortly, because they deemed the application complete on Tuesday and we got the letter yesterday. So the 60-day period has started. Well, we have 60 days as a township to comment from the date we get notification that the application is complete. So our 60-day period has now started. The NJDOT can override our ordinances. Even if we had an ordinance that specifically said no helistops, they have the ability to override that, and that is quite clear. The New Jersey Supreme Court ruled that way in the 70s. So we don't have the ability to stop this. In other words, we can't legislatively stop it in East Amwell. We can't stop it through our planning board. We can't stop it through the township committee. However, the NJDOT, under the Supreme Court decision, is required to take into account any legitimate concerns that are expressed by the community. So we have 60 days to submit a letter, we being the township committee. Residents have 30 days to submit their own comments, and the DOT has to take that into account and has to take it into account seriously. However, what you get from the case law, and there are 5 cases out there in the last few years dealing with these, you can't just make unsupported statements. The NJDOT does not have to give weight to unsupported statements. So simply saying that it will impact this harmed that, caused this, without any support, the NJDOT doesn't have to take that into account. As I said, there are 5 cases that are relatively recent. Some of them I don't view as particularly relevant to us. For example, putting a helipad on the Overlook Hospital in Summit, I don't view as particularly relevant to us. There are, however, 2 that are relevant to us. Trump put a helipad at his golf course in Colts Neck. The DOT gave him a license. His golf course was about exactly the same size as the Ridge. His was 310. I think the Ridge is a few acres short of that, but it's close. It's clear to me that, in that case, the court upheld the license. In that case, there were 48 landings per year, coincidentally the same as the Ridge application. No nighttime landings, coincidentally the same as the Ridge application. No refueling, coincidentally the same as the Ridge application. Limited use, not open to the general public, same as the Ridge application. So I think what has happened is the Ridge looked at the Trump case and patterned its application, its request after the Trump case. The other was not that far away, the Johnson estate up in Tewksbury. They sought an application to have a helicopter land. The township, the residents fought that. That was a 200 and some odd acre farm, but surrounded by 2,000 acres that were owned by the Johnson family. I think that was a pretty easy one for the court because the helicopter would just come down 78, and as soon as it turned off 78, it was onto the 2,000 Johnson acres. So it wasn't really impacting houses that were nearby. There were no houses nearby. As I said, the others I don't find particularly relevant. One was in an industrial area. One was on top of a hospital. But in each one of these, the court upheld the DOT's determination to grant the license. When I looked at the Ridge's application, my own view, and I'm not an aeronautics person, was that this application is very sparse. It just didn't seem complete to me. It seemed to be deficient in a number of respects. For example, and we posted maps around in case you want to look, but it shows the flight pattern, but only the last 3,000 feet. I would have thought that you'd have to show a flight pattern at the very least from when you enter East Amwell till you get to the golf course. It doesn't really get into any detail on emergency procedures. It just references our local fire company. There are really a number of things that I would have thought as a layperson would have to be significantly more detailed. So I was expecting that this application would be bounced, and it would be a while until this thing got approved. I reached out to the DOT after I had done a fair amount of homework and spoke to a fair number of people. And I spoke to the fellow who was handling the application. His name is Jerry Lightfinger. He's actually he was a very nice guy, and he was willing to spend as much time on the phone with me as I needed, and he was very patient, and he answered my questions. I took notes, I typed them up. I want to spend a couple minutes just sharing with you what I got out of the 45 or 50 minutes that I spent on the phone with Jerry. First of all, I said to Jerry, we need to know the flight plan coming into East Amwell. And Jerry said, our regulations, the NJDOT regulations, do not require the applicant to show a flight pattern more than 3,000 feet out from the helistop. And I said, why? That doesn't make sense to me. And he said, do you have helicopters flying over East Amwell all the time? And I said, yeah, I mean, not on an hourly basis, but they fly over East Amwell. He said, they don't have to file any flight plan. They can fly pretty much in any space they want to. And so until this gets within 3,000 feet of the golf course, it's just another helicopter in the air. So the NJDOT doesn't require a flight plan or flight pattern showing where this is coming into East Amwell and how it's going to get from our border to the Helistop. I then asked Jerry, there's no detailed crash plan. Don't need one. Said the regulations do not require showing a detailed crash plan. Restrictions. I asked Jerry, what commitments do we have in terms of the restrictions that are listed in the application? The no more than 8 takeoffs and landings April through December, and no more than 48 per season. And he said, well, if you want those restrictions or any other restrictions, you can articulate that in the letter that you send to us. Now, based on the cases I've seen, if we articulate the restrictions that he has in his license or in his application, I think the DOT will put those in the license. If we ask for tighter restrictions, I don't know, but based on the cases, it appears that the DOT, if the licensed applicant asks for reasonable restrictions, the town can request that they be a condition in the license. The 60-day deadline for us to provide a letter, I asked Jerry, is there any ability to ask for an extension? He said no. There are no extensions. It's a hard and fast 60 days because he said they are bound to act on this license within a certain time period. I asked him, will we get a response to anything that we submit, that the township submits, and he said yes, that we will get a response. Wildlife. I asked Jerry, what sort of studies, etc., does the DOT do regarding the impact of this Helistop on wildlife? And the answer was, there are 3 people that are assigned to the application, and an engineer has gone out to the ridge, reviewed the golf course, reviewed the area, and came to the conclusion that this shouldn't have any material adverse impact on wildlife. Now, I asked Jerry, is that the final say? And he said, no. He said, if East Amwell wants to submit any comments about impact on wildlife, we could do that. However, what he also said to me is, basically every application in a golf course setting where there are horses around it raised impact on horses, and he said none of those has been successful, at least to his recollection. And he said to me, the reason for that is that, well, he said 2 reasons. One, this helipad is right in the middle of the golf course. And so this helicopters coming in are going to stay up relatively high until they get over the golf course, and then they're going to come down. And since the horse trail is around the perimeter of the golf course, it wasn't causing the DOT engineer any indigestion. I'm not saying that what he's saying is correct. I'm just telling you what he told me. Second, he said, in the past, when they've sent people out and done test flights and looked at the horses, he said in most instances the horses don't even look at the helicopter. I asked him about endangered species, species of concern. They have not done any sort of analysis in that regard. He said if we believe that any of that will be impacted, we should state that in our letter. The Johnson estate, and by the way, I'm just going through these points as they came up in the conversation, not in any particular order. The Johnson estate, he told me that when that application was filed, there were several dozen residents that chimed in, including, and also the township. And he said the license was granted, and in the years since the license was granted, there hasn't been a single complaint. Golfing, golf balls flying past the helicopter. He said to me, the Ridge will have to have a mechanism in place to stop golf during takeoffs and landings. Practicalities. Jerry told me very few license requests get rejected. He said to me, and this kind of blew me away, the NJDOT is trying to promote aviation. And this type of aviation. And I said to him, I understand that in the context of a hospital, police, somewhere where it's doing public good. I got that. You want to put a helipad on the roof of a hospital, I can get my arms around that. There's public good. But a rich guy who wants to fly from his big piece of land into Wall Street every day and back isn't really doing public good. And he said, you don't have to show any public good. But he also pointed out that there is support in the township for a helipad for emergency use. He said there is some public good from the Helistop. The NJDOT typically gives significantly more weight to the letter it gets from the municipality than letters it gets from residents. I said, well, I understand the municipality obviously should be given weight. He said to me, most of the letters, and when he said most, he was talking about virtually everyone, were just unsupported statements. And as I said at the beginning, he told me they don't really give weight to unsupported statements. Here's my own impression from what I've read in the cases. I've done a bunch of poking around online because there were articles written about other applications that never went to court, but that were contested by the communities. I think the only way that we have of convincing NJDOT that this application shouldn't be granted is to demonstrate that it's going to have some adverse impact on wildlife.
So we went through this once before. Mike Meyer, 51 Van Lewis. About 10 or 12 years ago, we went through this whole process.
I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll have an open.
You're not referring to anything that has meaning to this township. We went through, we won.
Mike, I understand. We'll get to the public, okay? Please.
And I'll address your point. As I was saying, I think as a practical matter, from the discussions that I've had, or the discussion I had with the NJDOT, the looking at the cases, the looking at the articles, we're going to have to show an impact on wildlife. I don't think we're going to succeed on noise. There seems to be magic to having 1,000 feet, or at least 1,000 feet, between the Helistop and the nearest house. There were a number of other points that I got in the emails, things such as kicking up fertilizer, kicking up a lot of dust. I don't think we're going to gain any traction with the NJDOT on that, just based on, as I said, what I've seen. I know I'm not delivering the greatest news here. I'm just delivering what I've been told and what I found reading. I am thinking that we may want to do a test flight and actually see what impact it has, and see if in fact what Jerry believes is the case is in fact the case. Some of the other municipalities have done that. I'm not sure who pays for that, and if there is a desire to do the test flight, I can take that up with Jerry. I don't know whether we can ask that the Ridge do that as part of the application and pay for it, or whether the township would have to pay for it. But we can look into that if people think it would be useful. Run a helicopter down the flight pattern the last 3,000 feet and have it land in the area they propose to have it land, and see what impact it has. We can test the noise at some of the residents that are closest and see what the noise level is like, and come to our own conclusions and document that. My own view is that may not be such a bad idea, but I'd like to hear what other people think when we open to the public. I asked two, what I'll call experts, to join us tonight, because I reached out to them to educate myself on what I thought were two very important topics. One was the safety issue. What happens if there's a crash or just a fire? And so I invited Max, our deputy fire chief, to come and chat with us, and I have some questions that I want to ask Max that I've already asked him, but I want to ask them in front of you. And then I've invited Evan, who has great expertise on helicopters, who, when he answered my questions, very quickly made me realize that I had the helicopters totally backwards in terms of the dynamics. So I thought, since I had it backwards, maybe other people did as well, and I thought it would be useful. Plus, Evan and his company fly people in and out of farms, including horse farms. In fact, he lives on a horse farm, so I thought it would be useful for Evan to explain his experience in that regard. I'm going to start with Max and the safety issue. I had asked Max, what happens if a helicopter crashes? Can our fire company deal with that? And why don't you share with the audience what we discussed?
If there really is ever any sort of aircraft that does happen to crash, it has happened in the township in the past. It's not something we specialize in. It is also not something we're going to shy away from. We are set up to put out fuel fires, field fires. We can even extricate patients from those types of vehicles, I'm going to call them. The county also has in place multiple systems as far as mutual aid, and we also have what's called a foam task force, which is specifically for gasoline, diesel, jet fuel type spills at a bulk amount. The task force alone carries 2,000 to 2,500 gallons of Class B foam, which is primarily used for your fuels. And two of those task force members are in this end of the county, one in this township.
You had also mentioned to me that if something happened that was beyond our capability, Trenton has a team that specializes in this that could be here in 25, 30 minutes?
Yeah, if it does escalate past our county's abilities, Trenton Mercer Airport does have vehicles made for airport airplanes, helicopters, those types of emergencies. They carry all of the equipment needed for that.
And if the foam is sprayed, I believe you had mentioned to me that if the foam is sprayed, you have to file with the EPA.
Yes, if this is a new thing through the state, and it may have even been gone to a federal level through the EPA, anytime we dispense a Class B foam, we need to notify them, and they will figure out what they have to do in order to mitigate the issues that can come with it. With any sort of fuel spill, we're also going to be notifying the county hazmat team, and most of those are county board of health members. So they have all the expertise with dealing with the health aspect of that as well.
Now, you're familiar with the golf course, or at least reasonably familiar.
Yes.
I think you had said to me that you didn't see any problem getting your vehicles back there.
No. Most of the cart paths are wide enough for vehicles. During our outing, we even have a hole-in-one car that we give away that has been passed where they plan to put the Helistop.
Could I just follow up on that? So, assuming a crash, it's not necessarily going to crash at the ideal location of the Helistop.
Yeah.
It could crash anywhere. What about getting in and out and around some of the wooded areas, the lakes, the waterways? I mean, how challenging is it to get through this terrain?
There's always going to be a challenge to it. The most challenging is obviously going to be inside of the woods. It could just be the means of us just unloading an extra 1,000 foot of hose to make sure that we can get to it. And that's very doable in a short amount of time.
And the new fire truck is a four-wheel drive that can
Yes.
go.
Yeah, our new engine is equipped with four-wheel drive capabilities. We have tested it. It does work very well.
Any other questions from you guys?
Questions for Max?
Max, anything else you want to discuss on your own?
I can tell you on average, just through the firehouse, we do land 10 helicopters a year all throughout the township. And they're generally in farmers' fields. I've landed them right next to horse pastures, and we've never had an issue arise. We've never had complaints come out of it. But ours are all emergency type use. They're operated by state police. Not many people are going to stop those guys.
I'll land within.
Okay. And there'll be an opportunity during the open public to ask Max questions, or any of us. I'll turn to Evan. Can you share, before we get into questions with the audience, your experience?
Good evening, my name's Evan. I have been flying for 11 years, helicopters as a professional pilot. On top of that, I fly fixed wing as well. Started off as a flight instructor, flew in New York City for tours, flew for 2 private families that have helipads on their own property. Have flown corporate, have flown charter. You name it, I've done it. We've flown for DOT. We train the FBI. We train a little bit of everything. So we've done a lot of work over the years. I have about 7,500 hours of flying experience in a helicopter. Most military pilots retire with about 2,500 hours after a 20-year career. I do have some stuff I want to touch on with what you guys were discussing at some point.
Go ahead. I'm happy to open the floor to you. You know.
My first question is, you guys have asked the town to email you, correct?
Yes.
For issues that they have.
Yes.
Have you asked to have supportive emails? I know you got one, but did you ask for any support?
I think the way we phrased it was anybody who wanted to weigh in on the issue should email me. I don't think we asked for or against. It was just if you wanted to weigh in, if you wanted to provide comments. I circulated to probably a lot of people in the audience a memo I wrote on this that had my findings up to that point about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So we didn't specifically say for or against.
Okay, I'm just asking for my own personal knowledge.
Okay.
So, I think the Overlook Hospital is a good one to look at as well, because there's going to be a lot more activity at a hospital than there is at a golf course for medevac flights. So that's something to look, see what kind of noise complaints they have or concerns they may have. There's going to be a lot more frequency there, all hours of the night, day, weekends, holidays, you name it, it's 24/7. You mentioned 48 landings max. That is a very fair, when it comes to the amount of landings, that's a very fair number when it comes to somebody that could get an unlimited amount. 48 is nothing. You know how many landings are in New York City a day? There's probably 250.
Right to the public, please.
Aircraft accidents. That's something that, yes. How many accidents have you worked on aircraft-wise in your township?
To my knowledge, one.
Okay.
Can you speak into the microphone? We can't hear you back here.
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay.
New Jersey State Police. You guys mentioned that.
The aircraft was an airplane, right?
Yes, that was fixed wing.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned New Jersey State Police landing. Every time that New Jersey State Police gets dispatched out, the fire department is responsible for setting up a landing zone for them. Each landing zone is usually in a different spot than they used before. That is potentially a hazard risk, especially at nighttime, wires, that type of stuff. Having something in a town that has a specific spot that's safe may weigh in some benefit when it comes to safety stuff. I just made a couple notes as you were going on. I just wanted to try to touch on it. I'm not for it or against it. It doesn't matter to me if you guys get a Helistop in your town or not. I know you have some questions you want to address, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually learned a lot chatting with you, so I want to just ask some questions. Let's start with cost. I want to fly from Manhattan out to the Ridge on a weekday, play around the golf, and fly back home. Let's say I want to take 3 or 4 of my colleagues or clients. What am I looking at for cost round trip?
So I broke it down into 2 different price categories: single engine, twin engine. Most clients that are flying in and out of golf courses fly in a twin engine aircraft. That price from New York City to there, plus a trip back, is going to cost about $5,400. In a single engine, it's probably about $3,000.
Does the helicopter wait while these guys play golf? Or does it leave
They're-
and come back?
No company is going to leave an aircraft on site for 8 hours,
4 hours, right?
or whatever it's going to be. They're going to have to
So does that
reposition
count as-
somewhere else.
Does that count as 2 landings?
That's something you guys would have to figure out.
I don't see why one, David. It says takeoffs and landings. I would think that if you take off and land coming and take off and land going, or land and take off, that should count as 2. In your experience on these golf courses, how many people actually fly into the golf course?
There's no exact number, but I did reach out to one of the biggest charter operators in the area that's based out of Trenton. Everybody is well known or knows Trump National Golf Course in Bedminster has a helipad. They've had it for a number of years. They did maybe 6 last year. Now that's a very well-known golf course. I don't know, I did a quick research. I've never even heard of this golf course, and I live in Holland Township, and I have a business in Princeton. So just because they get a helipad doesn't mean that people are going to flock to it. I've landed at Hamilton Farms out in Bedminster a total of 3 times this year. Stone Harbor down in South Jersey, maybe 3 times. Other companies have landed there as well, but Stone Harbor is more of a tourist attraction place where the beach is. So that's why they're getting a lot more flights in that area.
Can you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Can you describe the altitudes that the helicopters will operate at as they approach
Yep.
the golf course and when they hit the 3,000-foot circle?
So you have your ingress and egress standards for each area we go to. We can't just decide that I'm going to fly to the golf course today and land. We have to call ahead and make an appointment. They have to give us or tell us what their procedures are for coming in for noise abatement. It's up to us if we want to adhere to that as a pilot. Now, safety can play a factor in that. If for some reason we're supposed to approach from the north and depart to the south, but if winds are a lot stronger, we may approach from the northwest or, a little bit off of that. Aircrafts predominantly pilots like to land into the wind because that's the safe thing to do, just like any commercial airliner out there. What else were we asking?
Altitude?
Altitude.
Oh, altitude. So altitude is defined as also what the heliport requests. They may say, we want you guys at 1,000 feet AGL or 1,000 feet MSL, depends on how they word it, to X amount of point of coming in. They usually give us pretty much a map like we're looking at right now up here, which is the same on the board up there. And it says point of entry and then, certain altitudes coming in. Some places do not have any of that. We have to make the decision ourselves. I can tell you firsthand, charter operators aren't going to be flying over your house at 50 feet on their way in. They want to be able to see where they're going. We're trying to be safe more than what the DOT restricts us to. So we may be a little higher. If you've been there a few times and you're more familiar with the pad, it might be a little lower. But we do take into consideration for the people that are living below us or in that area, because we deal with noise complaints all the time. Throughout the entire northeast of United States, there are very strict noise restrictions, like going out to East Hampton. We have specific routes that we're only allowed to take because we have a letter of authorization that allows us to do that. If not, we could be fined. But we're talking the Hamptons, 5,000 flights a year.
Evan, can you talk about the vortex a little bit? Because this is what I had totally wrong. I had thought that a lower flying helicopter would have a greater impact than a higher flying helicopter, and I had that totally backwards. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So living in this area, you probably have heard the morning commute of Merck flying back and forth to the city. They're usually flying at about 3,000 feet. We'll use my phone for instance, 3,000 feet. The noise that comes off of that is going to come out in a big pattern. Military did which actually I was just talking about today with the FAA. They did a flight test at some point for about noise projection out of an aircraft. The lower you fly, the less it impacts the residents, a majority of residents. It will be more isolated at that point. Now, that could go either way. The houses you fly directly over, of course it's going to be louder for them. If you fly at 3,000 feet, maybe 200 people are going to hear it compared to 25. Could go either way. But it would be quieter if it was lower for the township itself.
You live on a horse farm, and you've flown in and out of horse farms. Can you talk about your experience?
Yep.
The impact on the horses, I'm sorry.
Let me see a hands of how many people own a horse in here. We all know each horse is different. Some will not care. Some get spooked easily. A horse, for a better lack of terms, we can't control when it's out in an open field. When it's in an open field, it has the freedom to run around. The first couple times I've landed at my house, we were proactive. We put the horses in a stall, locked it up. Next time, let them out, landed next to them. Now they don't care. Now, at my horse facility that we have a manager that has race horses that come in and out, so I'm more cautious on that. Most animals, after the first time, don't care. But the pilots that are usually flying these type of flights take that into consideration as well. If you're out on your horse, in your horse pasture, riding or whatever the case is, they're not going to fly right over top of you. If they do, that's a concern that you could bring up. And I mean, fly over you as low level, 100 feet above you. Now, if you're 500 feet above you, that's a different story. Anybody can fly around here at 200, 300, 400, 500 feet. There's no law against that.
Anybody else? Any questions for him?
a couple of mine already.
Well, that's why I wanted
And I
to.
think, Evan, you
Explain
touched
the
upon it
picture
as well, but
that you're looking at right now.
Yes, I see a helicopter next to what appear to be a bunch of cows
Laying down.
laying down, yes.
They never got up when we landed.
So Evan, just one question on the Helistop. Is there some limitation on the type of helicopters or size restrictions? You classify it as, single or twin engine, but just curious if there's any.
The only restriction that could be in place is if it was a limited size Helistop. So if they only had a 50 by 50 spot, then an aircraft that's only allowed to land in that type of restricted size pattern could only, so it'd be a lighter or smaller aircraft.
Yeah.
Most helipads I saw on here is they got a, let's see where it was. Is it 99 by 99?
That's the safety.
That's a big spot.
Yeah.
Could Marine One land here?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They probably won't, but they could.
So this is big enough where you can see fairly large helicopters coming in and out potentially. Now, that may not be what the clients are coming in. I'm just trying to get an
Correct.
idea of magnitude here.
Well, if you're talking 5,400 for a twin engine to fly it
Yeah.
from Manhattan and back, something bigger is probably
Correct.
like
Yeah.
really expensive.
So would it matter whether it's twin engine or single engine in terms of what the residents are going to notice?
You would never even know. The only difference that they'll hear, or they may be able to tell, is a recip compared to a turbine aircraft. The sound difference is not going to be any different, though.
Before we open to the public, was there anything else you wanted to say before I?
Nope.
Okay. Look, this is not the first time many of you have been to this rodeo. The Ridge has come to the township 3 times in the past. And twice, well, really all 3 times its application was rejected. The first 2 times there were hearings. The 3rd time it was rejected because it was deemed to be identical to the 2nd time, so there wasn't even a need for a hearing. There's no requirement today for the Ridge to come to us for approval. I'm not sure why he came years ago. I think before 2016, the rules in New Jersey were that you had to go to your local planning board first. And if they rejected it, then you bring the rejection to the DOT, and the DOT does its thing. In 2016, the law changed in New Jersey to eliminate that requirement. So there's no need for an applicant to come to the local planning board and get approved or rejected. They go right to the DOT. But even before 2016, even if the local planning board had rejected it, the DOT could override that. So while he has been rejected or stopped in the past by East Amwell, we do not have the ability to stop him now. That legally, we can file comments, we can try to stop it that way if we can show some material adverse impact, but in terms of our ability to say no and override the DOT, we do not have that ability. There's no ambiguity there at all. We don't have that ability. Now, that being said, something occurred to me running this morning. I do my best thinking when I run. If Tim and I were neighbors and had adjoining farms, and we agreed with each other that we would never put a Helistop on our farms, we sign a contract. And then Tim goes running off to the NJDOT to get a license. The NJDOT isn't bound by our contract, but we are. And I would think that even though the NJDOT is not bound by our contract, I could go into court and sue Tim, either for monetary damages, or if monetary damages wouldn't compensate me, and I don't think they would, I could seek specific performance, meaning I could ask the judge to force Tim to adhere to our contract. Now, the cases that talk about the NJDOT overriding zoning laws, I'm not sure that's exactly what we're dealing with here. We have a one-on-one agreement with the Ridge. And what I need to do is sit down and go through that agreement. It's actually two agreements. And try to figure out whether there's anything in those agreements that prohibit him from putting in this Helistop. I had a conversation this morning with someone from the planning board who understands the history of this far better than I do, and there may be some legs to that. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but it occurred to me this morning. So that's a theory I want to pursue. Would that prevent the NJDOT from granting the license? No. But if there's something to that theory, we could then sue the Ridge to hold him to the agreement that he made with the township at the time that golf course was approved. So that is a potential alternative which I have to pursue, and we'll see where that takes us. But in terms of looking to history and saying, well, we were able to stop him 3 times in the past, why can't we do it now? You now know why. Does anybody else have anything? David? No.
Okay, what I'm going to do now is open to the public, and since there's a lot of folks here who probably want to speak, I'm going to start in the front on this side and go back and come up. So I hope you're okay with that. That was just random. I didn't decide against you. And so we're going to start here in this first row. If anyone has a comment, please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and state your comment. Yes. Okay.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. I'm very loud. My name is Barbara Buda. I live on 36 Van Loos Road.
Yes.
And I live in 10 years in this county, but I feel like it's part of me. So my question to you would be, you are flying here. How many airports are around here within 15 to 20 minutes that somebody can utilize instead of for their own good, feeling good and landing just directly and not even changing from slippers and going to the golf course can they fly into. I am aware of Reddington, Salisbury Airport. There is Mercer County, of course. There is something in Pittstown or around.
Correct.
How many more we have? Plenty. Princeton has one, 20 minutes away. There is more probably, yes?
Give me 1 second. I have a flying app I'm looking at right now, so I can give you an accurate answer.
So I will go to the next. It's rather
Correct.
comment. It's very hard to live somewhere where you own the land. You think that we are in charge of what's happening around us, and we are not. Definitely not. Because if somebody decides that next day they will build, I don't know, some factory because they own the land, we cannot use the golf course. Nobody can get access if you just want to go for one day, but we have to agree to everything. First of all, environmental impact. Somebody said, well, it was done, and now, anybody is aware that we have eagles here, just somewhere on the edge of the ridge? There is 2 bald eagles nesting somewhere. I see them. I have pictures if somebody wants to see. It's endangered species and still on the endangered species list. And I don't know how to avoid collision with if there will be something like this. Secondly, there are kestrels, which are also endangered and also on this list. And there is many, many more birds which are on the list and endangered. Pileated woodpeckers are coming here. I don't know how they will be impacted. I'm just thinking they might be, but I'm sure there is it's more people who know much better how it will be impacted. So, do you have that?
There's about 4 airports within maybe, I don't know the driving time, but I would say 30 minutes.
I know that Princeton is 25 because I used to drive
there you
there. And so why not to propose that they use those facilities to land there? They're much better prepared, already existing. What is the point of basically flying over our heads? My boss, I work at Merck, is flying every day above, and I'm ready to shoot. If I can.
I just want to remind everyone, this is televised and live streamed.
I am joking because we talked to Ken Fraser one time saying, you know that you are flying and my dog is barking every time when you are flying above our house. It's not exactly above our house, but we know exactly what time he's going and coming back. So it's not that like you cannot hear it. So it has a great impact, and I don't own horses, but I'm sure it has impact on livestock too.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm not normally rude by nature, but if I have to be, I will be a little bit. I just want to keep it moving, so please be efficient. Yes, next.
Mary Pat Parkhill, 187 Wartsville. I've been here 25 years. I'd like to agree with her on 2 points. At Wartsville, I'm like almost right next door. I see the golf course, and yes, I saw the 2 eagles right next to that golf course. And second, yes, I worked at Chubb, which is right next door to Merck, and we heard that helicopter all the time. So I have a few questions. Flying dawn to dusk, in the summertime, do you know what time the sun comes up? Like about, what, 5 a.m.? Are the helicopters going to be allowed to fly over us at 5 a.m. in the morning?
Do you know the answer for that?
If you want a technical answer, we can fly 24 hours a day.
Well, they're not going to have lights, and they said no nighttime.
That's correct.
But
I would say this, though. In my experience of flying golfers in and out of golf course, I don't think I've ever been at a course before 8 o'clock.
Yeah, a lot of tee times don't start till 7:30, 7 o'clock.
yeah, well, if they start at 7 and they want to get there early enough, they'll be flying over the houses while everybody's still asleep. And there is a state ordinance saying 7 o'clock noise. So they shouldn't be allowed over our heads until 7 o'clock.
We could always insert.
That's a restriction that you guys
could
could
put that
in.
restriction in the letter.
Oh, I would love to see that. Also, will this be a stepping stone for this guy to have PGA tournaments? We don't want that either. We can't handle the traffic. We don't want, my neighbors and I, we're right there. We don't want these people walking on our property trying to sneak onto the golf course. We don't want PGA. Is this a stepping stone?
All I would say is they have requested in the past an events ordinance, which the Township Committee has not acted on, which would give them the latitude to have large events. So my sense is they have every intention of having larger events, whether they're PGA and that large, I don't know. But I would say that's probably the direction they're heading.
Am I allowed to use my inheritance and hire a helicopter and fly over the golf course all day long? Thank
Yes, you
You
can.
could hire it. There's your guy right there. Okay. Okay, the next, anyone else in this first row? Okay, the next row. Anyone have a comment or want to? And again, you could even just state your name and say, I support or don't support the application, just so it's on the record. Okay, and one thing I just thought of, let's circulate it. If anyone would circulate a piece of paper just to have an attendance, it might be useful. Just to say, and if you don't feel like filling it out, you don't have to. But if anybody wants their name on to be recorded as being on the attendance, please fill it out. Okay, yes. Yes, please do.
Michelle Miller, 42 Manners Road. I just wanted to get a brief explanation of the 3,000 feet on the map there. I just didn't understand that, so I was wondering if you could.
The 3,000 feet, in my understanding, is that's just what the DOT requests. That's their buffer, and usually it's because of obstacles, not because of what might be in the flight path or something like that. But it is an obstacle, something that they have to fill out. And I believe I looked on the application on the back couple of pages. It has every obstacle listed, how many feet. The obstacles may only be on the inner ring, not the outer ring. I don't know why they picked the 3,000 or what the magic number is, but when it comes to the aviation side, there's no support on that. I don't know.
When these are the laws that govern not just helistops, but the aviation. And the provisions for heliports or helistops require two scale drawings. One is the 1,000-foot ring and the other is the 3,000 foot, and those are the two that are on there.
Okay.
That's all he needed to provide. That surprised me. It kind of blew me away, but when I spoke to the DOT, to the fellow I referred to earlier, he told me it's right in the law, and I went and looked, and in fact it is.
Okay. That was just
Okay.
get clarification.
Thank you. Anyone else in that row? Okay, we'll move to the next row. Anyone in the third row with a comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Henry Van Busicum from 76 Old York Road, and having heard the testimony so far, it seems to me that what's necessary is an expert witness's testimony. That will bear the gravity that the township needs. So far, we've talked about horses, and I think a dog. In my observations, we got pigs, cows, chickens, we got all kinds of critters as well as wildlife. I'm not a farmer, but I believe that farmers might have some impact that a layperson would not be aware of. My suggestion is to seek out an expert witness that perhaps has already testified for another application in a similar setting. And there you would save some money because the testing's already been done. So look for another application in a rural setting with an expert witness testimony. Seek out that expert witness, and I think you might have some gravity with the DOT.
We are actually in the process of doing that, and we have a representative here this evening from the Sauerland Conservancy who is helping us with that. I also have someone else helping us try to get some testimony from the Audubon Society, and not just the local Audubon Society, but the national, to see if they have any useful information that will be helpful. but I absolutely positively agree with what you've just said. That's how we stop this application. That's how we're going to do it. We are going to have to show that allowing the helicopters to fly in and out of the ridge is going to have some adverse impact on wildlife. So I absolutely agree, and we are working on that.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else in that row? Okay, how about the next row back? Yes, please come forward.
I think you have two in that row.
Mike Worminski, 116 Wartsville Road. I've also seen the bald eagle from my house. The last gentleman, the point he made, this is an agriculturally based community. That's one of the businesses here. It's not just hobbies, and I think you might be able to look at impacts to businesses as well as just nuisance impacts to horses and things like that. A couple concerns I have. As a DOT project, are they required to do any environmental assessments or impact statements?
They send out an engineer. My impression is that the engineer didn't spend a lot of time there. I don't know that for sure, but that's the impression I got. And as far as I can tell, that's it. And if you find that very disappointing
I
and
do.
shocking, so do I. And I even said that to Jerry. I can't believe that such a skeletal thin application is adequate. I was not expecting that to be approved. I had assumed they would bounce it.
Yeah, in addition to the wildlife, there's a lot of sensitive environmental receptors there, the streams, the water courses, and things like that. If there was a crash, God forbid, and somebody had to go out, jet fuel likes to go downhill just like other liquids, and your firefighting foam, does that contain any PFOS compounds?
Yeah.
Okay, for the general audience, PFOS is the biggest emerging contaminant right now on the EPA's hit list, and the allowable levels are in the parts per trillion, not billion, trillion. And you get a spill of that, that's why you have to report it to the EPA. It gets in the groundwater, we're all in wells. I think there's more here that we need to look at or at least question with regarding the crash response and related impacts to the environment from that. Other question on wind direction. I'm glad that you mentioned that you have to land into the wind. I did not see a wind rose anywhere or how they determine that landing direction. Without a north arrow on this map, it appears it's from the westerly direction, and our prevailing winds are west to east, so they'd essentially be landing downwind or crosswind.
Correct. They will have to have a windsock on site to be able to that's part of their requirement.
Now, I understand that, but from their flight path here, questioning that, the wind rose is a study of wind over time, so you get your primary and secondary wind directions, and that's
Correct.
how you...
It's west to east. That's
right. And that's...
On my chart, or my page here, I just drew a line when I first got here on, and I will share it with them before I leave, on what most people who go through the application do not have an aviation background, nor have they consulted any aviation people except for the DOT when they submitted their application. So they drew a line where they thought might be the best, and that was for residential impact, maybe not for flight purpose.
Yeah, the application refers to this dynamic drawing as a sound abatement drawing, so I think that's right. I think this was drafted for sound, not for wind.
Correct. Most likely.
So, you guys were talking a little technical and maybe a bit over my head, but I think what I got out of it is that what they're showing as the takeoff and landing isn't in fact what the pilots are going to be using.
That's where I was going with that. I'm not an aviation expert, I'm a civil engineer, but just bringing up the points that I've seen going into other planning and designs. Normally they do a wind rose, and that dictates the wind directions, which would facilitate your takeoff and landing directions. And I didn't see that here.
Can I just ask a question? Are you saying wind rose?
Rose, R-O-S-E. Okay. Looks like a compass with a bunch of points on it. And if their flight path is primarily from New York City to here, they're going to be coming in the opposite direction. So not only are they going to have to, if this was their flight path, they'd have to fly a circle around it to come back in, because they're flying this way.
That's if they're coming from New York City.
Okay.
I don't know where
I heard
they're
somebody
get
say
their,
they're from
their
Manhattan.
people.
I did, and somebody on the planning board had said to me that this was going to be predominantly for a few people in New York City who want to fly out during the week with a bunch of clients or colleagues, play around the Gulf and fly back to the city. But that's not in the application. That's just something I was told by someone on the planning board.
The other thing, I question their volunteering that this would have beneficial use because it's emergency aircraft can use, or emergency response craft can use that. What we heard from the fire department was they land anywhere. They don't need a specific landing spot, although this would make it easier. They're claiming in their application it's only accessible by golf cart. So what good does that do in an emergency if you need a golf cart to get to it?
Do you want to address that, Max?
Yes. I know just from personal experience, I have had cars, trucks, golf carts, all back even further than where they're mapping it out to actually be. Those so-called cart lanes are more than wide enough for vehicles.
Okay, that's not what they say in here, though.
Our rescue squad was actually supportive of this Helistop when it came before the planning board previously. What I have been told is when you have problems over where I live, which is on this side of East Amwell, I have a farm, it's easy to land. Two have landed on my farm since we've owned it. It's not difficult to find a place to land a helicopter over by me. When you have an accident on the mountain, that's where it becomes difficult to find a place to land a helicopter. And our rescue squad, probably for the reasons Evan was articulating earlier, were supportive of having a Helistop that was known that the medevacs could fly into for problems on the mountain. You bring them down and you put them on. So I pass that along for what it's worth.
Okay, you said that there's an agreement between the township and the Ridge. Is the township named as an additional insured?
Well, I don't know what liability we would have if the helicopter crashed on the golf course. That's not a township problem.
What happens if it crashes short and ends on somebody's house or the road? Or
I don't see why that's a township problem any more than if an airplane crashes into somebody's house.
Located in the township.
I'm not an insurance expert, but I don't see why that would put East Amwell at risk.
Okay.
That's about all I had.
Okay, thank you. I think there was someone else in that row? Yes.
Andrea Bonnet, 17 Ridge Road. Just a couple things. I'm sorry I missed the first few minutes. I couldn't get here, but is the FAA involved with this in any way?
Yes, he has to file something with the FAA, and that's one of the pieces of paper that he'll have to deliver to the NJDOT. But I think the FAA is just to make sure it's not interfering with flight patterns.
It's not even that. The FAA doesn't care where you land, as long as you're doing it by the right rules. So as long as you're not breaking visibility restrictions as well as cloud limits, that type of stuff, they don't care if you land on private property or an airport. That's not their jurisdiction. That's the New Jersey DOT Aeronautical Division.
The reason I ask is because about 10 or 15 years ago, the township was having a big problem with aerobatic planes. I don't know if you remember that. But the FAA gave them permission. They gave them a block, or I forget what they called it.
They still have the block.
East Amwell, because they said we were not very densely populated, so if they had an accident, they wouldn't kill quite so many people, which I thought was positively brilliant. So I don't have a lot of confidence in their judgment either. But the other thing is, in terms of what Mr. Wolf said, Mr. Wolf knows I hardly ever agree with him about anything. But this time I truly do. I was on the township committee, although it was mostly the planning board and the Board of Health that had, my memory is 30 or 40 meetings apiece to meet with the golf course to try to work out all kinds of details about it. And the golf course agreed in good faith and signed off on all these agreements. And it's been 14 years since I was on the township committee, so I don't remember any of the details. But I agree with Mr. Wolf. If they signed off on something in good faith, by golly, they ought to stick with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else in that row? Are you in that row? Okay, please come forward. I'm losing the depth perception there of what row I'm in. So.
Sorry, Jamie Atkinson, 201 Wurtsville Road.
Hi, Jamie.
And I just wanted to ask also a question of clarification on the, from Evan, in terms of the landing. How long does the process take for a helicopter, once it comes into the vicinity, to actually land?
So once it enters that 3,000-foot ring, which is roughly probably a half a mile, should take no more than 3 minutes, and that's a generous 3 minutes.
Okay. How loud? Give me a measurement in terms of...
Each aircraft has a different decibel.
Depending on its make, depending on
correct.
the single
Make and
or
model.
twin?
Each specific make and model have a decibel, what do you want to call it? It's a... Spec. Yeah, spec that each manufacturer has to put out.
Can you give us a range?
I'll get back to you on that. I'll at least give it to somebody that can look that up for you.
Okay. And just once again, with regard to the altitude, so at 3,000 or half a mile away, how high am I? Range, again, I realize it's going to depend on flight conditions.
I would say roughly 1,000 feet.
Okay. My question is just, is this thing coming at 3,000 feet and then dropping straight down?
It's going to come on an angle.
It's going to come on an angle. Okay. And have we determined what we think at this point really will be the flight path? Is that accurate or is that not accurate? Is that what came up on the...
That is, in my opinion, none of this is accurate until the DOT grants the final approval for it. So anything can be changed.
So I guess, Mike, is the intent accurate? In other words,
He's asking,
that's
is
what
the
they
flight
want.
pattern that's shown on there, that cone, is that accurate?
Yeah.
I don't know who filed this, and I don't know
who
if that's
gave us these
what they
pictures? We
want.
must know, right? I mean, somebody...
Yeah, these are part of the application. Well, I think what we've learned is this flight pattern that's laid out here seems to be more for sound.
When you
than it
say
is
for here, you're referring to the
this
pictures on the
round
wall.
circle, right.
Okay, that
So-
we can see.
And we heard it's west to east, so my guess is it's a little bit kind of...
I mean, I live literally on the golf course, like many of us, so I'm sure we want to know
Yeah.
exactly where this is coming in as best as we can determine at this point. If you're saying that there's some question about this, we can get some clarification on it.
Well, I'm going to reach out to the engineer who's handling this application tomorrow to talk about the flight path, because my impression is that it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's shown on here isn't what they're really going to be using, and I want to make sure that he's focused on that. And I also want to talk about the time restriction, because I think that was a very good suggestion. Can that be built into, not just dawn to dusk, can we build in specific hours?
Mm-hmm.
And then there may be other things that come up in the course of the rest of the meeting, but I'll find out.
Okay. But apparently, Department of Transportation doesn't care which way that arrow goes on there. It doesn't matter to them.
Can I tell you something? I don't think they care about this application at all.
Okay.
That's not to say that, they're entirely ambivalent, but I was just amazed at the responses I got. I don't think they care that much at all.
Okay. I want to, the point that was made with regard to the contract and whatever agreements that the Ridge, either as a company or as a neighbor or whatever, have made with the community in the past. Are there other ways that we as neighbors, the township, can lean on the Ridge and say this is really important? You've done this multiple times. You can see the reaction in the community is not favorable. We've made it pretty clear we don't want the helipad here. It doesn't sound like it's that big a selling point. I mean, we're hearing that it's rarely going to be used at all, or maybe it will be. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
But
I think the only comment I would make there is I think we need to, as a governing body, we need to be a little careful because they are a resident and a taxpayer and have rights also.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the residents are intelligent people, and there's probably a lot of ideas and strategies that residents can come up with and be creative with, that don't necessarily need the endorsement or initiation of a township committee to do.
And everybody's done, I want to speak as a resident, I may say some things.
Sure. I know that as neighbors, conversations around water quality, water use, those have been very real issues. And I think the Ridge and the township have worked throughout the years to make sure that the quality of water is not put in jeopardy. I mean, there are all kinds of things that we do. And I think that that sometimes the township has been a good neighbor to a company in some ways, and maybe testing has decided, it should slack off, or, other kinds of things that we do. And those are the kinds of points. We don't need to work that out tonight. I'm just agreeing with the notion of the contract and what's a good relationship is all about.
Yeah, we're going to dig into that area.
Great.
Yes.
And the last thing that I would, I don't know whether the fairgrounds could be used as a helipad. I mean, that's right on 202. It's a large open space. I mean, I don't want to, there may be neighbors there, so I don't want to send something like that. But somebody said other airports. There are a lot of different airports that are closer.
I
than
have one
30
thing to say about that.
Yeah.
Tread lightly when you say stuff like that. Tread lightly, because you're not okay with it in one spot, but you're okay with it in a different spot.
Understood. And my spot happens to be closer than many people's spots, so I understand that. But I've been to the fairgrounds, and as we said, and Mr. Wolf, you pointed out, one of the previous paths for a helicopter went right up 78, so there doesn't seem to be sound. Well, if you're flying right up 202, it might not be as big a sound issue as if you're driving up Worstville or Backbrook Road. I mean, it's a slightly different picture. And I do hope, I mean, I've been very encouraged that I've heard township representatives indicate they're not in favor of this. I do worry a little bit that we have expert witnesses who are telling us it's not a safety issue, that it's probably not even going to bother anybody here tonight. I was hoping that at least it's my viewpoint that this is not something that we want in the township, and I hope we'll find some creative ways to work together and find some other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, on the experts, the goal here was to just present facts so that I don't get emails from people saying, gee, you need to put this in the township letter, when I know it's not going to move the needle of the DOT at all. And that was really the purpose of it. I want to focus on things that may move the DOT letter, and crashes, et cetera, just that they're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to stop this application.
Mm-hmm.
And credibility is very important. We have to go with our best hand. We can't just take every card in the deck and throw it and hope.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the purpose for having these experts here, so that they can answer questions and people can really now start to focus on the issues that matter. I'm still convinced setting aside the contract issue, I'm still convinced it's the wildlife.
Okay. Terrific.
That's my own view.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Thanks, James.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, the next row. Yes, I see a hand.
Good evening. I'm Marlene Sigmund, 74 Vanderloos Road.
Hi.
Been here 39 years. I'm really glad that you came up with the idea of the zoning, because that's the first thing that I was going to mention, is that, there was an application years ago to permit the golf course to be built here in the first place. And I am sure there are many, many, many things in that zoning and planning documentation that need to be looked at, and hopefully that would be helpful. I have two questions. Do we have a state legislator who we could work with and could help us? The DOT obviously is working on its own criteria, which seem to be none, which is very strange, that there are no criteria for the application to be approved. Nothing.
I actually received,
Yes.
did you want to say something?
No, I was going to paraphrase what you did, but since you received it, why don't you?
Assemblyperson Varelli and Senator Turner, both their offices reached out to me because they had each received at least 2 letters from residents. To make a long story short, because I had conversations with both of them, I don't think they feel that they can do anything here to stop this. And I suppose I understand why, because even if you went to the DOT and you exerted leverage and they rejected the Ridge's application, the Ridge can go to court. And what would the DOT say when it's granted similar applications many, many times before? Why would the DOT be able to or how would the DOT justify not granting this one?
Okay, so I understand. And am I correct in concluding that there are no criteria for the application to be approved or denied?
There are criteria, and I actually had laid it out in the memo I sent around, and it's also summarized in the letter we got back from them a couple of days ago. Although I will tell you, the letter doesn't list all the criteria that's in the statute, and I don't know why. But in any event, there are 12 or 13 criteria that they have to take into account. Aviation development, surrounding land uses, local land use ordinances, topography, the potential impact of noise produced by the aircraft in accordance with FAA regulations, air traffic patterns proposed to be used, air operational demand, aircraft movement operations, capacity of nearby aeronautical facilities, which is a point somebody made earlier, economic factors, public comments, public hearing testimony, comments from local authorities, and any other factors deemed relevant by the department. That's the criteria.
Okay.
I can tell you that when you read the cases, it's awfully hard to move the needle on most of this criteria.
Well, I just want to make one comment about that. As I think we all know here, that we won our zoning case in court where in the textbooks, East Amwell, I'm from a planning background, and planners respond to the fact that East Amwell was successful in winning our zoning case, so maybe we'll be the first. So,
We'll try.
And the final thing is I think that if we have the time, and I guess we have to do it, just like we won the zoning case because we had the data, I think we have to be very assiduous in coming up with data about wildlife, about economic impact on the farms. I mean, as the gentleman mentioned, we're not, the town is economically agricultural, and that again, that could be documented. So I think that hopefully the combination of, if we can find something in the zoning documents that I can't believe that there wasn't something in there that would have prevented this in the first place. And secondly, just whatever the points are in the statute, to address them with data. Thank you.
And by the way, let me just comment, just so everyone knows, the 26th, a couple days ago, is when the clock started. That's when we got the
So we have
date on the
60
letter.
days?
60 days from the 26th.
Yeah, we got it yesterday, but it starts on the date of the letter, and the date on the letter is the 26th.
Anything on the governor, where he might stand on this kind of thing?
He wants to legalize marijuana, so I don't think it's okay. Can we?
Okay. I won't go any further with that.
Okay. That same row, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to move it along because I know we have folks over here who want to comment, so.
All right, I'm Greg Krupp. I live at 15 Laga Court. I've been a resident of the township for about 20 years. And I just wanted to share an experience. About 5 or 6 years ago, the state police did land at the golf course. And we heard that coming for some distance. We did have horses. Not only couldn't we get them, we couldn't get them for several hours after the helicopter landed. And I did do some calculations. So somebody asked about the noise. So a twin engine generates about 120 decibels. So when you look at the property line, you're getting to, just by calculation, at about 500 feet away, that's 87 decibels. And you lose about 8 to 10 decibels. Actually, I'm wrong. It's 6 decibels for every doubling of the distance. So at 1,000 feet, you're still going to be hearing about 81 decibels. And 82 is where hearing protection is required. So, and then, Evan, it talks about blade slap. So I'm sure you know what that is with the vibrations that are created. So I know when that state police helicopter landed, it did rattle the whole house. So could you tell me a little bit about what, I would expect, within that 3,000 foot envelope in terms of noise and impact in a house?
Correct. So when the state police landed, they probably circled a few times.
And I came straight in.
I guarantee they did.
They came straight in from the east.
Okay. So that's not
I watched them.
That's not their standard procedure.
Well, I watched them.
Okay. So blade slap is generated by a fast airspeed shallow descent. And that's where you'll get that loud chop sound. So if someone's doing a shallow descent from far out, you will hear that sound louder. Most EMS companies will circle an area multiple times before they land because that's what they have to do by regulation. The sound that's going to put out, it's not going to be quiet. Let's face it, it's an aircraft. It's in the air. It's going to make sound. So yes, you will hear it.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, next row. Anyone in the next row?
I'm looking.
Anyone else in this section?
I'm just looking something up.
Okay, yes.
I have one question. What was the decibel level you came up with?
It's 120 from a twin engine.
And then by the time it goes out the 1,000 feet?
81,
82, I thought.
At 500 feet, it's 87 decibels.
And a lawnmower is 90 decibels, just for comparison. A vacuum cleaner shows 80 decibels. And that's just on a quick Google search, just for noise comparison.
Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Rick Fassett at 117 Backbrook Road. I can throw a bowling ball to the golf course from my house. I've never flown helicopters, but I jumped out of a lot of them. And I've seen them crash. And I know that at the golf course, they have 3 rather large lakes there that are interlocked together, interconnected together. And I know that most of us are on wells. And I know that in the past, the aquifer has been a serious concern of ours. If a plane crashed, a helicopter crashed, and some of the fuel and some of the foam had to be used to extinguish that thing and got into the lakes, I would imagine it wouldn't take very long to get into the aquifer. I know also that I've been there 25 years, and I've been dealing with Mr. Moore as soon as he started thinking about coming to East Amwell. And he's not a very nice person to deal with as far as myself and my neighbors are concerned with, who had personal interaction with the gentleman. But he's of the belief that he can basically do anything he wants to do. Damn the township, damn the neighbors and that. And he's already expressed that to us on several occasions. And several of the people that were at that conversation are in this room right now to verify that. I don't know much about birds, but there is eagles, there are hawks, and I know that the ridge is being bothered greatly by the Canadian geese. Now, I don't know if they're still a protected animal, but I can imagine, I know we hear about bird strikes on airplanes. I can imagine jets with the turbines are prone to a similar, likely of an accident or something like that. I also know that I've been on a helicopter when it went out of auto rotation, and we crashed, and luckily it was in Vietnam and I survived, but it was a harrowing experience, let me tell you that. But helicopters, they inherently have a lot of maintenance, a lot more than a fixed wing Piper Cup or something like that. I think that the thing is like 5 times the amount of maintenance. They are prone to crash. They are prone to have problems. And just recently, I think it was this summer, PSE&G was examining the high tension wires around here. And our house, our windows, I have 47 windows in my house, and those windows were shaking and making quite a bit of noise. The helicopter that people talk about, Merck, we hear that almost every day. We also hear the National Guard and the Reserve, Air Guard or whatever, and they're coming up, I guess, from Trenton. They come over our head. So it does make an impact. I know New Jersey DOT or whatever, DOJ, they don't care about the noise. They don't live here. Come on, even the helicopter gentleman, do you have a helicopter coming over your house and disturb, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, vibrating the windows, and the animals, dogs, other wildlife, and that is a concern. I believe that the township was very understanding to Mr. Moore's applications in the past and that, but I have a tendency to believe that he's trying to push the envelope as much as he can. I know he's talked about this before, and here he is again, doing this. So if there's any way we could stop him or at least restrict him. Oh, one of the other things my wife wants me to ask you is who's going to count the amount of trips that the vendor comes in with their clients, and is it just one vendor or is it going to be multiple vendors coming in with these people? Is each vendor going to be allowed to bring in 6 to 8 people? So that multiplies a lot of that. So I think the people here have some genuine concerns, and the person that was pro this, he's probably a golfer. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your service, by the way.
You're welcome. Proud to have served, glad to have survived.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else in this row? There was one in the front. I'll let you speak, but you missed your turn earlier, but that's okay. You can
Stanley Capcaman, 86 Wellsville Road. Any concern for the gas pipe passing by in vicinity of the golf course? And in a possibility of crash, this would be double hazard.
I'm not sure I understand the gas.
Gas pipe. Pipeline, sorry.
I don't know of any plans for it to go through the golf course.
It's already there.
The exist. I thought you were talking about what's going on. Okay.
Pipeline goes through the golf course?
Nearby.
Is it where? Can someone mark on this map where it is? Is it? I know, but I'm trying to.
It's almost touching.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so we're done with this side. Let's start with the back of this side coming forward. Anyone in the back row? Coming forward. Anybody? Yes, please.
Trish Buckwalter, 125 Backbrook Road, Ringgoes. You commented on the fact that your horses weren't disturbed, but it was only after you had sort of very nicely introduced them by having the copter come in when they were in the barn and then quietly let them figure it out again. What my concern is, the Trail Association has a 50 foot easement around the golf course. The easement is also named for the Amwell Valley Hounds hunt and also for the Amwell Valley Pony Club. My concern is we have children who ride that around that easement, and it only takes one time for a horse to spook before someone gets really badly hurt. And so I think this is one of the things that maybe we should do a little more research on.
Do we have any sense of the volume of the horse traffic around that trail?
Well, not really. I can certainly count them, I guess, but we have 200 plus members that belong to the Trail Association. Any one of those members could be riding on that or around that course at any time. I don't know how many members the hunt has, but I'm sure somebody will fill you in on that.
Do you have an email address for your members? Is there any way you could
Yes,
poll
we
your
have a
members and
mass
ask?
email address.
Oh,
I can't speak to the number, but I would say I ride the trails extensively, and that area, there's more apt to run into people riding than any of the other areas within the Trail Association. And I would say there's more footprints as well. So I would say that it gets
a lot of
fairly
use.
high usage compared to other areas of the trail.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Jessica Wysocki.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason for the high volume is that before the golf course was there were extensive trails through that particular 300-acre property. So when Bryce Thompson et al. Sold the farms to make the golf course, that's why there was a stipulation for a 50-foot easement around there. And you can access that easement because it's right in the center of the valley. So people from both ends of East Amwell can ride through there.
if we could get any information about volume, I think that would be very helpful.
Will do.
If you could poll the members and just get some sense of how frequently they use it. I don't need precision, but just some sense
I'll
and
just
when.
send out an email and ask people to tell me whether they use the trail or not.
And when? What days of the week are there? Is it more weekend traffic, more weekday traffic?
Well, this summer, we've all gone swimming instead of riding, so.
Just one thought for anyone who has information on the hounds. Do they go through the golf course? I know that they kind of run kind of wild. Does anyone? They, okay. Well, it appears to be. It appears to.
Yeah, they don't run wild, but we do use that right of way.
Okay, the right of way.
All
Okay.
the way around the
Okay.
golf course.
Okay.
And we use trails at the courtesy of our neighbours, all around that area.
But they wouldn't run through the course at all. Okay.
I just, again, I have an entrance to the trails on our property. We see them all the time. Lots of children.
Okay.
Lots of children.
Okay, back to this area. I'm coming forward. Yes.
Nancy Cunningham, 14 Wirtsville Road. I know that the Township Committee has 30 days longer than the general public to submit comments, but it might be helpful since you're recommending that we make substantiated statements in our comments, and it sounds like you're going to be tapping into some experts, getting some actual data that might help support our position. Is it possible that you could when you get that information, you could get it back to us, back to the public in enough time for us to use it to submit our own
Absolutely.
comments?
We'll post it on the webpage as soon as we get it.
Okay. So we need to keep checking the township webpage and looking for
Yes.
the information when you get it. Great.
I think if you sign up, you'll get alerts, right? Yeah, so if you sign up, you'll get, if we put information there, you'll be notified that information was put there. Is that true, Allison? Yes.
So any information that's put on your website will get notified about?
You can select if you want
Yeah.
to see, if you want to see township
Alerts.
committee members, you
So-
can check a box, minutes, you could check a box, and when minutes are put on, you'll get an alert that minutes were put on.
Right.
If you want certain other information, selective information, you can check boxes and you'll get alerts whenever that information is put on the webpage.
So we'll set it up so that this will fire an alert.
Okay, so you'll set it up so this
Yeah.
specific.
Can we do that, Allison? Let me just
Can you do
confirm.
that?
Yeah, we can do two things. One, if you go onto the website, there is a button towards the bottom that says Notify Me. You go into Notify Me and you can check off what you want to be notified about. The second thing we'll do, so if you send an email out, you'll get an email or a text depending on what you select to be notified by. The other way is on the front page. There's the news flash box. We'll put an alert on there. There's an alert on there tonight for tonight's meeting, which have attachments. So we can put attachments in there, documents, etc. So when this information is available, we can put a news flash out. You can go on there. You'll get notified about that too. You'll notify me, but it will be on the front page and on that news flash box.
So we'll implement that procedure so that everyone who signs up for the alert will get the alert.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Might not be for you, but for whoever was talking about the trail system, if that trail goes in that 1,000-foot ring, you may have a leg to stand on.
It does, right there.
So that could be a questionable spot for the DOT.
Right where? Would you mark it?
Right there.
Because I don't,
There's your 1,000-foot ring, the trail
Oh,
follows
this is the
perimeter.
trail?
This is the perimeter of the farm, and the trail follows the perimeter.
I'm not sure what the DOT regs say on the distance of where that has to be, but that could be a question to ask them, or something that should be brought up.
Thank you.
When it comes to the safety, that could be a safety question.
Joanne Pasamato, I'll be brief. I'm not a resident of the township, but I am a member of the Amwell Valley Hounds. And that safety issue is exactly why I'm very concerned with this matter. We do go out with half a dozen to sometimes 24 riders at a time. And it's one thing to be in control of your horse because there's a aircraft in the sky. It's another matter when one's coming down upon you if you're not aware that you're on a trail nearby a landing area. And I personally live in Alexandria Township in the flight path of Sky Manor Airport. And there are times when it's a bit frightening if an aircraft comes lower than usual. And, you know, sometimes a helicopter will come down at a low level. And I've had a horse spook on me in that situation at my own house when he's used to seeing aircraft go over all the time. So
Thank you.
that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, coming forward, yes?
Yeah, hi, I'm Blaine Hummel, Rileyville Road. Just two things to mention. I don't recall the exact name or title of the document that came from because it wasn't part of the package that was apparently delivered here to the township, the engineering thing, but
Oh,
I got...
it was part of the package.
Okay,
Those maps came with the application.
it did.
They did. And we had them copied so that we could have them posted. We only got one copy with the application.
Was the report delivered with it, not just the maps?
There is no report.
So we still don't know what that is.
Yes, that is what is necessary to be included with an application for the application to be complete. Those two drawings are listed in the criteria for a complete application.
So we don't know what the data were that went into the creation of that map.
Well, yes, the law specifies what data, how those maps have to be created.
So this is a noise abatement map. Essentially, it shows the path of least noise.
That's the way he describes it in the application.
Right.
He describes it as the noise abatement.
Path of least noise. But as you've pointed out, helicopters take off and land into the wind.
Majority of the time.
Right. So the wind is likely to go pretty well all over from northwest to from northwest and southwest inward as a prevailing wind.
Correct. With that being said, there's no difference in taking off with a crosswind.
No, understood. I'm just talking about the point at which the aircraft, the machine is coming into the
Correct.
to the pad.
Now, with your, I don't necessarily think this is a noise abatement path that this is generated. I don't know. I've seen a couple applications before, and I've never seen that specific note on it. So that's something that you should ask the DOT. I could be wrong, but
Right, but
Here we
we're
go.
at least convinced this isn't the prevailing flight path that they're proposing.
correct. I don't know. I'm not the one that drew it.
It says here in the application, noise abatement procedures. Weather permitting, helicopters will take off and land according to the plan prepared by dynamic engineering to abate noise. That's that plan.
So that's going to be the takeoff and landing path.
For
Okay.
noise abatement,
No,
according to their expert.
in other words,
Right, yeah, we
the
understand.
flight that will generate the least noise
That could
is
be it.
that, but that won't necessarily be the one that they will
They can pick whatever they want.
precisely. Okay.
Now, granted, when they pick that, they should keep in mind of what might be the best for the town.
And was there any requirement or need for a go-around in case they couldn't land at the pad when they came in?
In the application, they have to have a certain distance or something like that to be able to. So some of that has to do with airplanes.
Right.
So originally, when they had to go for a Helistop permit or for a permanent pad like this, it was based off of an airplane diagram for a runway. So
Right.
you had to have X amount of feet on each side of the runway for approach and takeoff. They have changed that over time, and they've changed it more to a Helistop. Now, a go-around should be initiated by a pilot well in advance before that.
Understood.
If they were below the tree lines, they're kind of dedicated to their landing at that point,
Okay.
on the safety side of things.
All right. My second point, I agree with at least two of the comments that were made here about dealing with an accident or an incident that would involve a crash and a fire with high-octane avgas and our ability to fight it and the materials we'll use and how that might affect the aquifer. And in light of the fact that the flight might actually be approaching from or taking off over Back Brook, I'll just point out that Back Brook is New Jersey state trout waters, and it's also headwaters to the Neshannock. And so there's special waters, and it would require really special training and equipment to try to deal with something that crashes into that stream. Okay?
Thanks, Blaine.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, coming forward, anyone else? Okay.
How are you? My name is Bob Kramer. I'm from 100 Van Luz Road, and I am a professional pilot. I've been involved in aviation for near 50 years, 37 years commercial with the airline industry, 30 years with military flying, and the balance in corporate. So I guess the rhetorical question is, why are we even here? If the DOT and the FAA have sole jurisdiction and approval authority, why are we here?
Why are we here?
Yeah. Is it just?
There's a.
I mean, are we going to have an impact on this?
Well, we're going to attempt. We're going to make
Okay.
every attempt we can to put forth rationale as to why we think this should not happen.
Okay.
Of course.
I would, in your record, I would probably suggest the Trail Association, if there's a deed restriction that Bryce Thompson, when they agreed to the development of this golf course, if that's in the deed, that would probably be pretty important as far as, and how about a tax revenue study as far as how that'll impact the ridge at Back Brook versus how will it negatively impact the residents living around this hillport? I can tell you, I flew many, many years, thousands of hours in and out of most commercial airports around the world. And real estate near an airport's not exactly as valuable as real estate out in a rural area. Okay, so that would be something to consider. 2JY6 mean anything? That's the FAA designation for the ridge at Boutbrook. They've already been deemed a heliport. The FAA gave them that authority back in 2006. So as far as the FAA is concerned, there is already a ridge at Boutbrook heliport. They've already given them an ingress, egress, arrival, departure, flight route. 135 degrees, either ingress, egress, or 270 degrees ingress, egress.
Are you sure that's the ridge and not the airport that used to exist off of Wardsville?
It's the ridge.
They landed there last month.
I just wanted to point out that might account for the fact that I noticed that at least in two locations in that document package, it stated heliport, not helistop.
In New Jersey, there's approximately 290 as of March of this year, 290 heliports, helistops. Of those, I believe there's 5. Evan, maybe you can tell me as far as golf courses. I know the National, I think Atlantic City has one. I think
You
there may
said 2JY6, right?
yeah, 2JY6. How about the impact? I think this is considered out here, and again, Evan, you may be able to tell me since I didn't operate in these kind of airspace, but would this be Category E airspace?
I'd have to look that up. It's,
Okay.
It's either
Most airports, Kennedy, Newark, that's Category B airspace. We go from A, B, C, D, E. Most of your rural airspace, non-populated areas would be Category E. Evan had mentioned something about altitude. Minimum IFR or VFR flight rules would suggest that you can't fly below 1,000 feet, 500 feet in a sparsely populated area. Below that, only for takeoffs and landings.
That's
Now,
for
that
fixed
may
wing.
have changed.
It's only for fixed wing.
That's fixed wing, so I can't, again, I didn't fly a helicopter.
I can comment on the 2JY6. That is at the golf club.
Okay.
What
Recreation.
does that mean?
Yeah, what's the
We're trying to
significance
get
of
the-
that?
JFK is Kennedy Airport. It's the nomenclature, it's the labeling that the FAA gives every airport around the world. ICAO, FAA. So LAX would be Los Angeles, Newark is EWR, Chicago is ORD. It used to be
I'm
at
still trying to
Orchard.
understand the ramifications.
If I could also ask, so, but you mentioned that's a heliport. What's the difference between a heliport and a helistop? Is there a technical?
There are technical terms, and I couldn't tell you exactly what they are. And it's only comes down, the DOT has its own specification on it, which is a helistop may only be for landing, no fuel, no hangar, no maintenance. A heliport will have fuel, could have maintenance, that type of stuff. At the end of the day, it's still
Right.
physically the same thing, but without having a maintenance or a fueling area or stuff like that.
A heliport is a dedicated area of defined dimensions, either at the ground level or elevated on a structure, designed for the landing or takeoff of helicopters and used solely for that purpose. A helistop means an area of defined dimensions, either at the ground level or elevated on a structure, designated for the landing or takeoff of helicopters, but not limited in use to that sole purpose. Helistops generally provide minimal or no support facilities and may be located in multiple use areas such as parking lots, dock areas, parks, athletic fields, and other suitable open spaces. That's how it's defined in the DOT rules.
The FAA determines noise curfew. I don't know how that's derived. I don't know if it's the local municipalities that give their input and then the FAA approves on it. Airports, Evan, I'm sure he's flown in and out of airports like DCA and LaGuardia. It's an absolute 11 o'clock curfew, 7 a.m. curfew. You take off and land anytime outside that unless you're in an emergency, and it's a very heavy fine. Again, something we may want to consider if you're going to try to build up some restrictions on the ridge at Backbrook. Also, when you talked about our area, Category airspace, something that's come along now that's very popular are drones. We have, I can't say hundreds, I'm not going to sensationalize, but we have many drones. A lot of people have the ability, the means, the finances to buy drones. The limiting altitude on drone recreational is 400 feet. So does that mean that the ridge at Backbrook, if they're approved for this heliport, they can suggest now that drones are now prohibited because their category airspace has changed? Or
No,
for that fact,
that'll never be.
well, you can't operate a drone in and around Kennedy or Newark.
Well, that's correct, because they have you can't have it in Class B, C, or D airspace. Now, in Class E or G, that's fine. A drone can only go to how many feet legally?
400.
Correct. When does Class E airspace start?
500 feet?
It depends. It's either 7 or 900. Or, I'm sorry, 900 or 1,200, depending on what area you're in. But that would still not pertain. Now, yes, can there be a drone in the area? 100%. Can someone legally fly a drone next to an airplane if they wanted to? No, that's not 100% legal, but it has been done. That is always a threat, just like birds, obstacles, that type of stuff. But drones are a big problem.
Okay, and I'll kind of segue on what you're talking about as far as decibels. A Jet Ranger, and I know you didn't have access. I did have access to the iPad while you were up front. But a Bell Jet Ranger is 100 decibels. A jet at 1,000 feet above the ground is 100. A jet at 1,000 feet above the ground is also 100 decibels, and a jet during takeoff is approximately 140 decibels. So I'm not familiar with the blade slop. I learned that tonight. I don't know how that would be quantified as far as decibel. My wife and I witnessed two medevac helicopters, one landing in our backyard and one landing across the street from us. And again, depending on the flight path for the arrival of state police, it was pretty noisy, and it was that blade slop you heard.
That's correct. It is loud, and you also have to think about that the New Jersey State Police have one of the biggest aircrafts that they operate.
Yeah, because they
on
have
the
the back
civilian
doors,
side.
the twin doors in the
Correct.
back end. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we're coming forward here. Who's next? I guess that row, I guess you're next. And everyone, thanks for your patience.
Hi, my name is Cindy Hoagland Nance. I'm a resident at 156 Cider Mill Road. I'm also one of the masters to the Amwell Valley Hounds and have been hunting in this territory for about 35 years, one of the reasons I moved into this community. I think most of the elements here, that most of the people in this room and yourselves, I get the impression that we're obviously all against this. You made a comment earlier on when you were speaking, Mr. Wolf, in reference to the fact that when you did talk to the DOT, that writing letters to them from general people like us are almost sounded like you said that they disregard it. So here we sit in a room and there's 50, 60 or so many people here. We've got 60 days to fight this. What can we do as residents to help you write the right response? I have no clue, and I was wondering if you could guide us on that.
Well, can I make one comment? Some of you have demonstrated specific expertise. If anyone wants to volunteer that expertise, I mean, a pilot with the kind of credentials, a military guy. I mean, if any of you guys want to put this together, Rick's leading kind of a committee on this, so to get input. So if anyone has specific expertise. As for resident letters, I mean, we're not against them. We think you should do it. But the point I think Mr. Wolf was making, and I'll let him speak to it, is just you just can't say we don't like it's going to be noisy. You have to sort of substantiate that with your stories.
Right.
I think if you give stories, I live here, I have these animals, when this happened, this was the impact. You know, if you give a story and tell your story, I think that would resonate. But to just say we're against it because of the noise, that's what they're saying. That's an unsubstantiated claim.
Right, I understand that. So I was just wondering, we're all sitting in the room looking for ideas to make this not happen. So we're looking, I guess, also from guidance from you with your research. What do you need from us to help you? Okay, if there is experts, I mean, I'm certainly willing to try to write the letters, write about experiences and so forth, writing a letter in reference to being a master and a horse person here in the community. But I guess I'm a little feeling like I don't have enough information of what you really need. Can you get us out some information, what you're looking for, so that we can help you a little bit better on this?
Look, I had a conversation with someone in the room this evening, Carolyn from the Sauerland Conservancy, about getting expert testimony on the impact on wildlife. I believed then, and I still continue to believe, that that is our best shot. From what I've heard tonight, I think that while the DOT seems to generally disregard impact on horses, we may be able to demonstrate that we're different, particularly given the proximity of the trail, and also particularly if we can demonstrate that there's a significant volume of horse traffic on that trail. Beyond that, I mean, I'm open to suggestions. This is new to me, just like it is to you guys in terms of having to fight this battle with the DOT. The fellow I was talking with was a very nice guy, very patient, answered all my questions. I believe he answered them honestly. I don't think he had any reason to lie. And I walked out with the impression that they don't view this as a big deal. They actually like these helistops, and unless we can demonstrate that we're different from all the others, he's going to approve this application.
Understood. Now, question for you is, or kind of recapping over some of the things that have already happened and said tonight. You have had horses, you've had your helicopters land, you took your time to do it, we talked about that. But when we go along that easement, you have a helicopter land down there. I don't care if you're riding with yourself, you're riding with 10 horses, 20 horses, or just with your family and your children. Those horses will spook, and I can testify on that because I own another farm. I happen to be a mile and a half away from the Trump golf course. And I'm very concerned because we've lost, even though we have easements around the Trump, many of us that used to ride around there don't go there anymore. It's because we have incidences of helicopters landing. We have no control of when they're coming and going. Like, you could be riding your horse down that trail at 10 o'clock in the morning and someone lands, you're not prepared. Your horse is not prepared for that. It is extremely dangerous. I can bring people in that have fallen, off their horses. I know people that have gotten hurt. Now, again, we all write and sign releases, when we go on people's property it is a dangerous sport, no question about it. But we can't, when you're on a horse and a helicopter comes out of the blue and tries to land near you, we all know it's a noise factor. We know it's, the horses. Horses will spook at a garbage can they haven't seen in a road. What happens when someone really does get hurt? Who's liable for that when we're on their property? And do we need an accident to have to stop this? And that's, I guess some of my big concerns. And, between the Amwell Valley Trail Association and that membership and the Hunt membership, this is a horse trail community. This is why people are here. This is the beauty of our community here. It's an agricultural. We are a jewel. We are a diamond in the state of New Jersey for what we have here. And we've got to do whatever it takes to fight that, so we stop this type of noise pollution, closing down our trails and our networks. That's so important to the way of life in this valley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate what Tim said, to the extent that any resident has had or knows somebody who's had a adverse incident with a helicopter while riding a horse, that letter might have impact. So those letters should go out the door, and the more the merrier.
And the more specific.
Yes, where you were riding, the helicopter came over, what happened, yes, the detail.
I think that would have.
Look, it's certainly not going to hurt, and I think it could have a positive impact, particularly if there are a bunch of them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one observation. The issue with the horses, what you're saying about the horses not having an impact, I think would be the case if they're in a pasture, in a stable. But a rider on a horse on a trail, I think, is a totally different thing from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think that will matter.
I'm also landing within 100 feet of the horses. We're talking about 1,000 feet. So there is a difference. Those letters you should send.
Yeah.
It may hold some weight with the DOT. I doubt it, but it may.
And one other area that I think we'll look at is, based on winter storms we've had recently, people used to not worry about communities like us because we're dependent on well water. But the last two big storms, the GPU has really come down hard on the power companies, and it has really told them to prioritize these communities because we actually get hurt the worst when we have sustained power outages. So the notion of water pollution and contaminating wells really essentially leaves our community, without water for forever. So I think there's probably some ground we can cover there by connecting it to storm outages, power outages, and what the GPU has come down on both JCP&L and PSE&G recently on in terms of their reprioritization of rural communities. So we'll look at that aspect also. Okay, let's come forward and continue on. Anyone else? Okay.
My notes are on the phone. I'm not texting. So I'm Caroline Catman. I live at 258 Long Hill Road in Hillsborough, but I'm speaking tonight as the executive director of the Sauerland Conservancy, which is located at 83 Princeton Avenue in Hopewell. So the Conservancy and our thousands of members and supporters in and around the Sauerland Mountain region are opposed to the Helistop and additional helicopter flights at the ridge at Back Brook. As you probably know, our mission is to protect, promote, and preserve the unique character of the Sauerland Mountain region. And I just want to give you our main reasons for opposing the Helistop, and also to let you know that we are currently researching specific impacts to wildlife and water quality. But at the same time, personally, I would encourage residents to write letters. As you said, if they have experience with reactions of horses to helicopters, they could write about their dependence on water quantity and quality in the Sauerlands and concerns about impacts on water quality as a result of an accident. In my experience opposing gas pipelines and that sort of thing, I have found that it really does help for the public to inundate the powers that be with their concerns. If they could be as specific as possible, that's great. Is there an address that they should be writing to in this information?
Yeah, the regular New Jersey DOT.
NJDOT?
Has to be addressed to the Aeronautical Division.
Okay, we'll post that. We have that information in the...
But we'll post it. But by the way, that reminds me of something. There is a resident circulating a web page and saying go on that NJDOT web page and submit your complaint. Don't do it. It's the wrong web page. It's for comments on proposed regulations, not for comments on applications. So all you're going to get back is a message saying you sent it to the wrong place. So don't even bother. Write a letter. We'll post the address on the web page. Send it. Their web page portal is not for these kinds of complaints.
Okay, thanks. So the ridge at Back Brook is within what's called the Greater Sauerland Mountain Macrosite Important Bird Area. And I have data from eBird, which is a place where folks record sightings of birds in specific areas. And that site shows that there is evidence of the existence of a number of birds in the area that are endangered, threatened, and or species of concern, such as the American kestrel, the barred owl, Kentucky warbler, and others. And I'm happy to share the preliminary research that we've done with you. I've also asked some of our members who are on the board of the Washington Crossing Audubon Society to look into this matter and to look into impacts to nesting sites and migrating birds. So far, Juanita Hummel of the Washington Crossing Audubon Society has stated that, quote, there is no question that any disruption to breeding areas, particularly for our neotropical breeders that come here in the spring and summer to breed and then migrate south to Central and South America and the Caribbean in the winter, can have an adverse effect on their breeding success, and the neotropicals are already seeing a decline in numbers. We can show that there are precious few areas left in New Jersey where breeding neotropicals can find places to raise their families in peace, and East Amwell is one of those places. So that is some information that we can use. Secondly, landowners in proximity to the ridge with livestock, which are definitely prone to being spooked and stressed by aerial predators, definitely have a large case against this application. And also we feel impacts to water quality would be something that we really should work on showing, or potential impacts to water quality. This third reason that we're opposed may not matter much to the Department of Transportation, but I think it's worth putting out there. This isn't just any place. The Sauerland region is a place of refuge, renewal, and even inspiration to human beings. So I think I think it's also valuable to show the impact on quality of life and human health and safety, in addition to impacts on wildlife. The region has a unique ecology, history, and rural character that's worthy of protection and conservation. And this increased helicopter activity is another little chip away at the unique character of the region. Which is why it's something that the Conservancy is willing to oppose along with the citizens of East Amwell. So in summary, we think impacts on wildlife, impacts on water quality, and impacts on human health and safety should be the three main things that we focus on. And as we come up with evidence of these things, we'll definitely pass them on. But we would also like to send an e-blast out to our constituents. We have a contact list of about 5,000 people who are concerned about the Sauerlands. So maybe you can let me know what you would like us to put in that email. Do you want us to put the address that folks can write to separately, or do you want us to collect other information? We do have a lot of constituents who are scientists who can help us gather this information.
The answer is yes. I just, thinking on my feet here, I'm not exactly sure the most effective, but
Right.
we need to work that out, but
Okay.
absolutely yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, look, if you have that kind of volume and we could get a significant percentage to write letters, we may want those letters not only go to the DOT, but maybe to other places in the state. 15 or 20 people writing to a particular government official may not move the needle. 500? That's going to move the needle. So if you have that kind of ability to move that number of people, I want to think, and I actually want to talk to a few people about whether these letters should not just go to the DOT, but to a few other places.
Okay, so we'll be in
I'll
touch.
get back to you, Caroline. on
Okay,
that. I'll get
great.
back to you.
Thank you.
And are you willing to share your notes with us? Because that was a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
well thought
I'll
out
send you an
thing.
electronic
Thank
copy. I don't know if you want a paper copy. The links are really long, so you
The
probably.
electronic copy would be fine.
Okay.
Just email it to me and we'll get it.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your support. Okay, we're coming this way. Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Jessica Wysocki, 254 Wurtsville Road. July 30th, 2006. I don't know if anybody remembers that date, but that's the day that a plane crashed in my pasture. My neighbor, Terry Harrison, crashed his plane in my pasture and died, obviously. And I had the DEP come out and had to take away all kinds of soil, and just, it was kind of a nightmare. And all of the talk about the horses getting used to noises and stuff, that's true. My horses did get used to him taking off, but it's not predictable of, if I'm out on the trail, is my horse used to that sound or not, and how close is it? And so I think that is a valid point. And also it's just how the whole thing has sort of come about, how it's, they've come through the township and been refused, and now
they're going through back doors trying to get what they want. That doesn't seem right to me. So I have a lot of concerns, but the biggest thing is I lived through a crash, and the grass doesn't grow still. I mean, they dug my soil up, and I don't know who paid for it, because I didn't. I assume that his estate paid, but the state came in and they were wonderful to work with, but the grass doesn't grow in my pasture still in that spot. So I think there's a possibility that there could be problems if there were to be a crash. And the first 2 years, I lived in my house for 2 years prior to his death. And the first 2 years, I didn't really see any wildlife. Occasionally I'd see hawks and stuff. Well, after he died and the planes stopped coming, I started seeing all kinds of stuff. I have baby owlets every year. I have baby foxes. I have all kinds of wildlife that I love watching. I didn't see that prior to his death. So I do think that there is an impact on wildlife. And I didn't do a lot of research because I just found out about this, and I just haven't had time. But helicopters, they take off and land more often than fixed plane or whatever, the fixed wings. And Terry died taking off. So it's a real hazard. Pilots are required to have less training and less experience to be able to fly a helicopter. Terry had been a commercial airline pilot for years, and then he did all of his own, flying here afterwards. So he had hours and hours and hours. I don't even know how many hours he had. And he had a mechanical problem, and he crashed. And I don't want to see that happen again. I didn't think about it as when I was purchasing my house and bringing my horses there, but now that I know that it can happen, it worries me, and I don't want someone else to have to go through what I went through, and the repercussions that I still have, where I can look at that spot on my pasture, and that's where he died, and that's very bothersome to me. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes.
Philip Jacoby, 61 Ridge Road. First of all, I want to thank the Township Committee for getting this meeting together and letting everybody air their concerns. I want to thank Evan and Max for showing up especially and just sharing their expertise. I'm against. Let's start with that. Also, Richard, I am sorry about distributing an incorrect website address for making complaints. That's my fault. I'll take that one complaint.
It actually, I picked it up because I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer, so I picked up the subtlety when I looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was actually the fellow from the NJDOT, Jerry, who said to me, it appears that your residents are sending to this, and it's not the right one. And then when I read it, I picked up the subtlety, but I could see how you could make the mistake.
Absolutely, but part of that is a function of not having any information out here for us to say, guys, if you want to make comment, where do you make comment to?
And we'll get that out.
And yes, and knowing now that the township website will have that information, we appreciate that. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I totally agree with what Cindy Nance said, and especially with the Conservancy. I think that there's great value, as you've now said, to having a multitude of people make their concerns, even if it's just quality of life, known to the DOT. Because as neighbors, this just doesn't sound like something we want. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Coming forward? Anyone? Yes.
Mike Meyer, 51 Van Luz, and one question. How did we win the last few times? What were the reasons why the DOT denied the applications?
The DOT did not. He never filed with the DOT. It was our planning board that denied the
that was it?
application. Yes. That's the answer.
I can walk you through the old part.
Okay,
You used to have to go through the township to get the approval.
okay.
If you didn't have enough property, which is 50 acres, you needed to get a variance. 90% of the helipad applications were denied because townships wouldn't give a variance for it. If you have over to 50 acres, it was very hard for them to turn you down because you didn't need the variance for it.
Okay. I'm against,
Okay,
for the
thank you.
record.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Nancy Meyer, 51 Van Luz Road, and everybody's brought up great topics here, and we're all very concerned about them. I'm going to just reiterate a little bit more about the safety issue and the crash of the ultralight in 2006. So that has been our experience, sole experience with an airplane crash. I actually was in an ultralight. It's nothing but a glorified kite with a motor. And I mean, I'm not trying to downplay the fact that somebody was killed. I knew the individual that was killed in the crash. But I don't think we've had experience with what could happen with a helicopter crash. I think it's going to have a much larger impact than that ultralight did. And the fact that it would take Trenton 25 minutes to get here, I don't know. That, to me, that wouldn't be very acceptable if that was my house where it crashed, and then, oh, by the way, we've got to wait for Trenton to get here because we don't have a suitable force to come out and address it. So it's huge from a safety standpoint, from a wildlife standpoint, from somebody getting killed riding on a horse. The noise is atrocious because I do remember when a medvac landed, and it must have been on Van Luz Road. It was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. And that was once during the course of a year. What's going to happen if they do, 48 landings a year? It's going to bring down the property values like crazy. So, needless to say, I'm against this.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Next, anyone else coming forward? Oh.
Hello, my name is Bob Force. I live at 146 Backbrook. I grew up about 3 miles up on the Sauerland Mountains on Featherbed Lane and Van Dyke. That's where I came from. I always wanted to live on Mountain Road until I realized that it was a cut-through road. By the time I realized that, I didn't want to live up there anymore, and I learned why it's called the Sauerland Mountains, because there's no water up there. So I moved down into the valley. I lived around, I lived in Pennington, I lived in Flemington, waiting till my opportunity came to buy a house. In 2000, I moved into my house on Backbrook. The golf course was not yet completed. When I was trying to buy my house, I discussed with the township engineer, some zoning officials, couldn't tell you what their names were. They told me that it would have no impact on me at all. Okay. I'm an outside person. I spend most of my life outside of the house. I have a 4,500 square foot patio. When I get up in the morning, I like to go out there and drink my coffee and admire the world. Every day, I wake up, go out there to do that, and the golf course is out there, leaf blowing, weed whacking, and whatever else they're doing at 6 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Cupo will be, he lives right there next to the first tee. I live a little further away. Now I see this flight path thing here. So what you're telling me is it's up to the pilot at that point to decide whether he's going to ride up the valley and right into the spot or go around and come back?
At the end of the day, we have the authority to do what we want as pilot in command.
Right. So now, after I finally got my house where I wanted it, on the non-cut-through road and all that, now I'm going to be living in a runway for a hella something or another. And I have no power whatsoever to do anything about it. You know, it's very frustrating to me. You know, and then what do I tell the person that, so now I decide I'm out of here. I can't take it, because we all know from living around here that the helicopters are the noisiest things in the sky. You know, you can hear them 5, 6 miles away coming. You may not know where they are, but you'll see them sooner or later. So I think that my opinion would be, the part about the horses on the easement around the golf course should be a main focus on this whole thing. Because I see them from my backyard coming around the trail. The trail comes right past my house and around, and I see them out there all the time. They're heading towards the golf course. I really don't think it is. I would tell everybody, if there's anything you figure out that you need help with, I'm more than willing to help. There's no doubt about it. We can do whatever we need to do. I just don't know what I could possibly do to help this thing. I just think it's really wrong that this is happening to us this way. And my next question would be, does this gentleman do anything for the township? Anything at all? He lives 2 doors down from me, so I know who he is. I know he comes past my house at about 45 miles an hour going home. I know exactly who he is. But does he do, any, I heard the gentleman from the fire company saying you guys do an event there?
We do an annual golf outing.
And he just, you pay or he sponsors you?
We pay at a discounted rate. I think I'm not a part of that.
So there we go. It's not, okay, I was just curious, because my wife and I sat around and, I pick up garbage on the side of the roads for 2 different townships. I do all kinds of things to volunteer for the community. The company I work for, we give hundreds of turkeys to this place, and, I just went through that for Thanksgiving. But I've never heard his name attached to anything. And I was just curious. Anything good, yes, that would be it.
Can I comment?
Go ahead.
I have a comment for that.
Yes.
And I'm an outsider.
Yes.
I don't live in this township. I don't know him. I don't know any of you. I've met everybody here tonight for the first time. Why would he do anything for you guys if you hate him?
And hate when
I
moved in, I did not hate him.
I'm sorry, I'm going to, with respect to the fact that he is a resident, he is a homeowner, he's not here to engage.
Okay, well, I'm not,
I'd rather not go
I
into
didn't-
personal, right, okay.
I just,
Well, this is being
Why
recorded,
would he?
you could ask him.
He's probably on.
Yeah, you could ask him, yeah, tell him.
But I was just curious whether he did
I'd
anything
rather
for the
not get
community.
personal at this point, let's stay,
The hate part came from over there.
okay. Okay.
Just curious.
No, you
So
make
if
a
there
good
is
point.
anything I can help you with, if you need more people to write letters, or you want to go out and pick it in front of the place, heck, we can do what it is. But I really don't want it to be, we we heard about the eagles. Yes, I see them occasionally from my house. The kestrels, not so much by my house, up on the other end of the road. I see them up on the power lines up there all the time. If we start using those things as excuses to try to change something, you're going to be pitting neighbors against neighbors, okay? The person with the eagle in his tree over on the one side of the course, then we make it so that helicopters all fly down, let's say, my side of the street. I think that, it's terribly wrong. Because to get that spot, that location there where, my whole thing is the non-cut-through road, you can't hear 202. Yes, you can hear the train when it blows its whistle, but you can hear the one in Hopewell too. To start doing this is ridiculous.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right? Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, coming up, anyone else? Yes, I'll take one more question.
With respect to the issue of the zoning application and the planning application, if it turns out that this is in violation, can we remove the variance and then kick them out?
I think it's too early to comment on that.
Let us do some homework.
Yeah, we need to get the facts, okay? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to do sort of a partial close to the public. I'm going to ask any of the members of the Township Committee if they want to speak as a member of the public, because we sort of have two roles here. One is to represent the residents, all residents, and then the other is we are residents, so we do have the opportunity to speak. So does anyone have a comment?
Well, I would just say that I agree with all the comments. I think it's going to be extremely disruptive, particularly to the folks that live around the golf course. One thing that maybe we can zero in on is the numbers of folks that actually use the horse trails. I think if we can quantify that some way to put in a letter, that might get to Rick's point about animal welfare around the site.
And I think the distinction between horses in a pasture and horses being
Right.
ridden is an important distinction.
That's right.
I'd like to speak as a member of the public.
Sure. Yes.
But I want to do it as a member of the public, because I don't want any, I don't want any finger pointing about being up at the dais, so I'm going to come down. But I will turn the chair around so I don't have my back to a lot of people. Rick Wolf, 21 Rynearson Road. I agree with what all of you said here this evening. Kathy and I own 94 acres. This is paradise living here. We built our forever house here. We have an elevator in the house. You can go anywhere in the house in a wheelchair because we plan on being here forever. I want to take a different perspective on this situation. I'm a lawyer, and a lot of times people complain about the complexity of our laws. And when it comes to our zoning and land use laws, they tend to be very long and very complicated. And I say to people, the reason they're long and complicated is because people don't behave neighborly. And you wind up having lots of laws in place because people don't behave neighborly. Far Hills, for the longest time, where we used to live, did not have any noise ordinance until a gentleman bought a big estate there, and for some reason at 10 o'clock at night, in the dark, liked to fire up his leaf blower. And so the township, I'm not joking, it's in the paper, you can read about it.
I worked for him.
The Chubb?
No, what it was,
The CEO of Chubb,
is it the Chubb CEO? No, it was,
on Lake Road. The guy on Lake Road,
yeah.
who would fire up his leaf blower at 10 o'clock at night, literally.
He owned Beneficial.
Maybe it was
It
beneficial.
was Beneficial, yeah.
And so they had to enact a noise ordinance in Far Hills. And Far Hills wasn't a big law type of town. They believed people should do what they want on their property. Where am I going with this? Mr. Moore, the Ridge, is not behaving neighborly. And they haven't behaved neighborly, and this is really starting to bother me as a resident of this town. My wife and I are the single largest individual taxpayer in East Amwell. Could I challenge the assessment on my property? Yes. Could I get it reduced if I challenged it? Probably. Do I intend to challenge it? No. I'm a resident of this town. This is a great town. I have an obligation to make a contribution to this town, a financial contribution, so the town can continue to function. The Ridge is challenging its property tax assessment. Its property tax assessment is based on a value of roughly $10.6 million. They are now in court with the township challenging that assessment, claiming their golf course is worth $6 million. That's 300 acres of gorgeous land. I paid about $25,000 an acre for my farm. That land is worth at least as much as mine, so that land is worth at least $7.5 million raw. Plus the improvements on that land. To come in, take us into court and argue that it's only worth $6 million, to me is outrageous. It's not neighborly. It's not doing anything to benefit this town. Now, I'm a tax lawyer, actually. So I'm not a fan of people overpaying taxes, but you do have an obligation to your community. And he's not fulfilling that obligation. He's slapping us in the face. He's throwing us a giant middle finger. And he's now doing it again on this Helistop. He's throwing us a giant middle finger. He knows the residents are against this. He's been here 3 times. And I haven't been here during those times, but I have been told by people on the planning board that residents came out en masse against that Helistop. There's a resident here, D. Kellogg, who reached out to him to try to discuss this. He wouldn't take her call. So I'm not surprised he's not here tonight. I'm also wouldn't be surprised if he's not watching us, but I'm not surprised he's not here tonight. So I have a different take on this from my perspective as a resident, not as a perspective of a township committee member, as a perspective of a resident. If he moves forward with this Helistop, he has fundraisers at that club that I've been to for politicians running for office. I will not attend a fundraiser at that club. And I will let everyone that I know when fundraisers are being had at that club by politicians. And not only will I not attend, I will not vote for any politician that has a fundraiser at that club. I will not make a donation to an organization that patronizes that club. I will stick signs on my farm. And in fact, if anybody wants the same signs, I'll pay to have them made and hand them out to people, as many people who want them.
Helistop, hella no.
Right. I like that. Perfect. I don't have that kind of create. That was good. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I am tired of getting the middle finger.
Does this answer your question?
Okay.
Why we don't like them?
From what I've heard from people who've been here since the inception, it's consistent with what the few residents have said here this evening. He has done nothing for this town. Nothing.
And he's been very arrogant about it, too.
And that's not East Amwell. Let me tell you what East Amwell is. East Amwell is, Kathy and I were in our house about 3 weeks and my pickup truck got stuck in the snow. And some resident I never met before stayed there a half hour with his pickup truck to help get me out of the snow. That's East Amwell. When you drive around here during the snow and you see people who don't live in East Amwell driving off the roads because they go around the turns too fast and they go off the road, who's pulling them out? One of the farmers with their tractor, one of the residents with their pickup trucks. That's East Amwell. People do for each other in East Amwell. We don't throw each other the middle finger. That's not the way we live here. I'm tired of it. So I have a different perspective on this. I have an economic perspective. He wants to make our life a living hell. I'm going to do what I can to make his life a living hell. And I'm hoping that as many people as possible in this town will join me on that one. And I'm not doing this I want to reiterate, I'm not doing this in my capacity as the deputy mayor of East Amwell. I'm doing this in my capacity as a resident of East Amwell. And that's all I have to say.
Anyone else?
Everything's well stated.
Okay, I'm going to do the same. And again, thank you all for coming. And again, I'm speaking not as the mayor or an elected official or someone who's been on the township committee for 7 years. But I just want to share my thoughts. And my thoughts are sort of similar, but I have a little bit more detail. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Levittown, Pennsylvania. Lots of World War II veterans. I don't know why that's funny, but anyway, everyone shared, right? We were all families with 5 and 6 and 7 kids. If someone got a new hydraulic jack, that jack spent more time rolling down the street to everyone's house to lift the cars and change the tires than it did in the person who owned it. And we grew up in a community where if a mother was having a baby and in the hospital, the other mothers took care of those babies. And that's what neighbors did. And I grew up in an environment where that would happen. Neighbors shared their gifts and their burdens. And taxes are a burden. So today, as a resident of East Amwell, I wish my neighbors shared in their successes. I love golf. Unfortunately, I can't play anymore. I had a birth defect in my back, had surgery done, and I can't play golf. But I love golf. I actually really love the Ridge. It's a great facility. As Rick said, I've been there for fundraisers, for events. I had an event, a fundraiser for my own campaign at the Ridge. was a very nice event. I've never played golf there, so I don't know how good the golf course is, but I know members. I know people who do play there. And Joel Moore should be very proud of his golf course. It's a first-class course. He's done a great job. But in my opinion, however, the Ridge and Joel is not acting like a good neighbor. A few years ago, during the Amwell Valley Little Baseball League closing ceremonies, I was there as a father and a coach. I was just starting the township committee. I think David was on it at the time, I don't recall. And a resident came up to me and said, Backbrook is green. There's this fluorescent green liquid in the Backbrook. I don't know if anyone remembers that. So I got in my car, I left, I drove with the resident, we went down Backbrook, and sure enough, you could see right where there's a tributary coming from the Ridge Golf Course, going into the Backbrook, a green chemical. It's not up this side, it went right down and then down towards the bridge at Van Loo's. And it was shocking because of the color. It was just this fluorescent lime green. It looked like Gatorade. So I immediately found a jar somewhere. Someone had, I don't know who it was, they lived on Backbrook Road. I went up, knocked on their door, said, you got a jar or something I could collect some water? So I collected a sample because I wasn't sure how long it would be there, and I brought it to the township. And unfortunately, the township at the time didn't take any action on it. I took it to a lab myself. The lab said, the jar it's in, it's just not, it's not viable in terms of its accuracy and effectiveness because there was no chain of custody. So the whole thing kind of died. We never knew what it was. But a little later, we did report it to the DEP, and some DEP people came out. I think that happened. I never heard any results. But then a couple years later, the planning board voted to change the zoning, and the township committee to change the zoning to add 2 mini hotels, 2 6,250-foot hotels, a large swimming complex, hydrated tennis courts, and supporting structures. And believe it or not, a reduction in the amount of testing that they had to do to the stream and the Backbrook and reporting. So to some degree, we've created, I think someone said, he keeps coming to the well and we keep giving. And I don't think that's very neighborly. So those zoning changes were requested by the Ridge to increase their members' experiences. Right? Their members. It's about their members. But what about the residents? So at the time, I didn't support these decisions, and this isn't about politics, but I didn't support them because I didn't feel there was a benefit to the taxpayers. What benefit do any of us in this room as taxpayers get by giving more to someone who already made an agreement to abide by a certain set of rules? We get no benefit to the golf course. Right? There's no East Amwell Day. There's no Bring Your Friends Day. There's no give the firehouse a free round of golf day, as far as I know. There's no benefit to the hotel there. We all have homes. We're not going to stay there. There's no benefit to a swimming pool. We're not members. Right? There's no benefit to the hydrated tennis courts. However, it's detrimental. That someone testified that that's going to use 250,000 more gallons of water if it's done. That's coming out of the same well that we're all drinking out of. We're just a bunch of straws going into the same aquifer. So instead of thanking the community for these zoning concessions, we're here in litigation, as Rick said today. The trial starts tomorrow. We are in court tomorrow, East Amwell Township versus the Ridge, because the Ridge feels their taxes are too high. Now, they want them to be cut in half and expect the residents of East Amwell to pick up the tab. They expect us to subsidize that golf course. That's what it would be, because if their taxes go down, ours go up, because the budget's the budget, and you got to come up with the same amount of dollars. So now that we have the Ridge wanting even more, right? They want an events ordinance. They want us to essentially give them the right to have thousands of people and conduct professional golf courses. Look what little bicycle races do. We've approved 100, 200 bicycle races. Look at the congestion in the streets. Look at the debris and litter and the complaints we get, just from bicycle races. Because, again, we take care of our community, and others are now taking advantage of the beauty of our community. So, and now a Helistop, so that very affluent people and members and guests can enjoy the scenic beauty of East Amwell and play around the golf. So I asked the Ridge, and specifically Joel, if you're watching, I ask you, how do these impactful add-ons to the original agreement, both spirit and legal agreement with this township, benefit the residents of East Amwell? I'd like to hear how they benefit us. And as I stated earlier, neighbors share each other's success. So how does East Amwell share in Joel's success with his golf course? You are not being a good neighbor, Joel. And I'd be happy to chat with you offline about it. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're concluding the open to the public. If anyone else has any final remarks, do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close. Second.
All in favor? Okay. So at this point, please don't disrupt, because I just want to, so our action going forward, we have a big task here, folks. The Township Committee has its task, which is to respond within 60 days as a community, and obviously we have to represent all opinions in that response. I appreciate the guests we've had here for giving this information. We wanted to be fair. We wanted to bring facts, whether they're supportive or not, to our cause. But we wanted everyone to understand what we're up against. And we will ask the residents to participate. So this group, tell 10 people, get a movement going. Again, the municipal government can only do so much. There's some we're going to have to rely on the residents to take on. Because obviously government can't do certain things, but there are things we're going to do. We have, we commit as a township committee to doing everything within our power to stop this, if we can. It's going to be a tough task. The cards are stacked against us for sure, based on case law and what we've heard. But we'll try. We'll do what we can.
I just want to give a special thanks to Evan and Max. They're here on their own time, and they not only spent the time here, but I pestered Max twice. I was on the phone with Evan while he had company at his house for about 45 minutes, taking him away. And they've both been very gracious, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
And by the way, we do have an uphill battle, but that's what East Amwell's all about. So bring it on.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, you. Well, wait a minute. Hang on.